Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Angie Housman. Angie Housman was born on February 18, 1984, in St. Louis, Missouri. Her father had left the family before her birth, and as a result, she never had the opportunity to know him. When Angie was 1 year old, her mother married a man named Ronald, and they had a son together. Angie got along well with her stepfather and was very close to her younger brother. Angie was a friendly and outgoing child who easily made friends with those around her. She lived with her family in a quiet suburban area of St. Louis. In 1993, at the age of 9, Angie attended the 4th grade at a local elementary school, which was just over a mile from her home. To get to school, she would take the bus from a nearby stop, and her parents felt relatively safe allowing her to travel alone due to the stop's proximity to their house. Angie usually walked to the bus stop with other neighborhood children, and after school, they would be watched over by several parents who would keep an eye on them from their windows as they made their way home. A tradition established in the neighborhood was that locals would watch over children and make sure they got home safely from the bus stop. On November 18th, Angie followed her usual routine and attended school, finishing at 3 p.m. She boarded the school bus with some neighborhood kids and got off at her stop. The other kids lived closer to the stop, so they walked ahead, leaving Angie to walk the remaining short distance home alone. However, Angie failed to arrive home, which was unusual. Her parents started to worry about half an hour later. They decided to walk along Angie's usual route from their house to the bus stop to see if they could find her. During their search, they spoke with other kids from Angie's school. They confirmed that she had gotten off the bus with them and was walking toward her home. Her parents also talked to neighbors who usually kept an eye on the kids but were busy that day and didn't see anything. Angie's parents and their friends combed the area but couldn't find her. As night began to fall, Angie's parents decided to call the police for assistance. Police officers quickly joined the search for Angie. The cold weather made it unlikely that she would have wandered off on her own, so they initially focused on the possibility of something more serious happening to her. A recent kidnapping in the neighborhood, involving an 11-year-old girl just 10 days earlier, further heightened their concerns. The man had approached the girl as she got off the school bus and tried to drag her into the bushes, but she managed to escape. Since the man was still at large, the police considered the possibility that he might be involved in Angie's disappearance. The police brought in dogs trained to track scents, and the dogs picked up Angie's scent near the bus stop. The dogs followed the scent for about half the distance to Angie's house, but then lost it. This suggested that Angie might have gotten into a vehicle at that point, which made the police think that she might have been abducted. The police also used helicopters with special sensors to search the area and looked along the banks of a small stream near Angie's home, but they did not find Angie or any of her belongings. The first day of the search for Angie yielded no results, prompting the police to reach out to the media for assistance. As a result, news of her disappearance spread rapidly throughout the city, generating over 300 calls to the police department within 24 hours. More than 20 additional officers were brought in to help handle the large number of new leads in the case. Despite this effort, none of the leads led to Angie's discovery. Detectives explored every possible scenario, and from the early stages of the investigation, they began to scrutinize Angie's stepfather. He denied any involvement in her disappearance and claimed he would never harm her. To clear his name, he agreed to a polygraph test and other checks, urging the police to focus on finding Angie rather than wasting time on him. The investigation also led to the discovery of Angie's biological father, who had never had any direct contact with his daughter. However, her mother reported that he had been seen driving past their house on multiple occasions, watching Angie play outside. Although this behavior raised suspicions among detectives, the man had a solid alibi that checked out. On the third day of Angie's disappearance, the FBI stepped in to assist the police department, which then allocated even more officers to the case. Everyone realized that something awful must have occurred to Angie, as it was unlikely she could have survived on her own in the freezing weather. A new lead emerged. Someone reported a suspicious man driving a blue sedan slowly through Angie's neighborhood. The description of this man matched the one given by a girl who had narrowly escaped an abduction attempt just 10 days before Angie vanished. The police created a composite sketch of the suspect and featured it in the news. Volunteers distributed thousands of flyers with the sketch. But the man's identity remained a mystery. As the case gained national attention, it was covered on television, attracting even more leads. The police carefully examined each new lead, but none of them led to Angie's discovery. The case also drew in psychics. They began calling Angie's home to share their alleged visions. One psychic claimed that Angie was alive and even provided a specific location where she being held, a large national park 25 miles from her home. However, the detectives did not give any credence to these claims. A reward of $10,000 was offered to anyone who could provide information about Angie's disappearance, which led to a large number of tips being submitted. During the investigation, detectives discovered a concerning detail. Angie had told her teacher a few days before she vanished that she planned to go on a nature trip with her uncle. However, Angie's parents were unaware of any uncle, and it seemed Angie had fabricated this story. This led investigators to consider the possibility that Angie might have known her abductor beforehand and referred to them as her uncle. Unfortunately, the conversation with her teacher did not provide any information about this mysterious individual. The investigation stalled, with no progress made in the following days. On November 27th, 9 days after Angie's disappearance, an important development in the case was found. A hunter contacted the police, reported that he found a body in the woods of a national park. Upon arriving at the scene, police were met with a disturbing sight. A young girl's body was tied to a tree, naked, with her head completely wrapped in tape except for her nose. Her hands were also bound with handcuffs. Near where the body was found, they found a bag containing personal items, which were quickly identified as Angie's remains. Among the belongings were notebooks with her name. After being transferred to the medical examiner, a detailed examination of the body revealed additional shocking facts. The removal of tape from her head uncovered a piece of underwear lodged in her mouth. The autopsy results indicated that Angie's death had occurred only a few hours before the body was discovered. This suggested she was held captive for 9 days, only to be left to freeze to death at the scene. Experts further determined that Angie suffered numerous injuries and had been sexually assaulted during her ordeal. Forensic analysts carefully inspected every proof collected from the crime scene and identified a fingerprint on the tape used to wrap Angie's head. They cross-referenced this evidence against potential suspects in their database, but unfortunately, this led to no new leads. The discovery of the body accelerated the police investigation, prompting the allocation of additional resources to help solve the case. The community was shocked by the extreme brutality of the crime and was deeply concerned for their children's safety, with many escorting their kids to bus stops and keeping a close watch over them at all times. A few days after Angie's discovery, concerns escalated further. On December 1st, 10-year-old Cassidy went missing from a nearby town, just 10 miles from Angie's home. Cassidy asked her mother for permission to visit friends who lived just a few hundred yards away, but then she disappeared. Cassidy's disappearance sparked an extensive police investigation, and detectives began to suspect the possibility that Cassidy's case might be linked to a serial killer. Although they considered the possibility that the same person was behind both abductions, they lacked concrete evidence to support this theory. 10 days later, Cassidy's body was found in St. Louis, wrapped in bed sheets and covered with a pink curtain. The cause of death was severe head injuries. Despite efforts, detectives couldn't find any leads to the killer. Furthermore, they started questioning whether the same person was responsible for both Angie's and Cassidy's deaths. Detectives suspected they might be dealing with two different killers due to the distinct characteristics of the crimes. Around the same time, they identified a 37-year-old man named Gary as a potential suspect. Gary had previously attempted to abduct a girl just before Angie went missing and regularly traveled to St. Louis for work. The man was initially investigated for potential involvement in the murders of Angie and Cassidy, but he had an alibi for the time of their disappearances. Although he was not connected to these crimes, he did admit to assaulting 4 other girls and was subsequently sentenced to 5 years in prison. In February of the following year, a significant development in the case was revealed when detectives finally found Cassidy's body. Nearby, they found tire tracks that were identified as coming from a pickup truck model frequently used by a prominent car rental company. The distinctive vehicles were easily recognizable due to their vibrant brand logos. With this new information, detectives interviewed residents in Cassidy's neighborhood, asking if anyone had seen one of these pickup trucks. One woman reported seeing a vehicle from the car rental company near her neighbor's house about a week after Cassidy's disappearance. Police found a woman who lived with her husband and brother at the house they were investigating. When questioned, the woman claimed neither she nor her husband, brother had rented the pickup associated with the crime, and they had no involvement in the case. However, detectives were skeptical of her claims and obtained a search warrant for the house. Upon searching the house, investigators found blood traces from the victim, Cassidy, in the basement, along with the murder weapon. Further investigation revealed that the woman's brother, Thomas, was the one who had rented the pickup in question. Initially, Thomas denied any involvement but eventually confessed when confronted with the evidence. According to Thomas's confession, Cassidy had come to his door, wanting to invite his nephews out to play. He invited her into the house and led her to the basement, where he attempted to assault her. When Cassidy screamed, Thomas struck her with a heavy object and then covered her body with bed sheets. After committing the crime, Thomas went to work as usual. Upon returning home, his sister told him that she had discovered the body in the basement. She made it clear that she didn't want to know the details of what happened and insisted that the body be disposed of immediately. Cassidy's body remained in the basement for a week due to ongoing searches, and Thomas was too afraid to move it. Once things had calmed down, he rented a pickup truck and took the body to St. Louis. He hid her body there. Thomas was eventually sentenced to death for his crimes but died in prison several years later due to illness. Despite being questioned about Angie's case, he maintained his innocence, leading detectives to conclude that the crimes were unrelated. The investigation stalled for many months with few leads coming in. Years after Angie's murder, detectives faced another challenge when the reward for information was set to expire, sparking concerns that the public would stop providing tips and assistance in the case. However, in 2001, a local businessman donated $250,000 as a reward for information on Angie's case. This large sum of money caused a spike in many information to the police. But unfortunately, there are no clues to help solve the case. In 2001, a new development emerged in the Angie Housman case when Corey Fox, an inmate, turned himself in and confessed to multiple murders, including the murder of Angie Housman. Corey Fox provided detailed information about Angie's abduction and captivity, including being tied to a tree, with her underwear used as a gag. However, upon further questioning, detectives found inconsistencies in his confession, such as incorrectly stating that Angie's hands were restrained with plastic handcuffs instead of iron ones. Further investigation revealed that Corey Fox also fabricated parts of his confession, possibly due to extensive media coverage of Angie's case. Another tragic case happened in 2002, the abduction and murder of a 6-year-old girl, briefly sparked renewed interest in Angie's case. However, it was soon determined that the two cases were unrelated. The perpetrator in the 2002 case was a neighbor. He quickly confessed during interrogation, while Angie's case remained unsolved. Several years after Angie's murder, detectives reopened the case in 2007. They re-examined the documents and found a peculiar detail. A man named Roger Martin was in a parked car near the crime scene when Angie's body was discovered. When questioned, Roger claimed he was in the area for hunting, but a search of his car found no hunting gear. Further investigation revealed that Roger had a criminal record involving children, including an assault near the location where Angie's body was found. These crimes occurred before Angie's death, but the police had not thoroughly investigated Roger at the time. The new detective team called Roger in for questioning. He denied any involvement in Angie's murder, claiming he was in the area by chance. Roger stated that he was still at work when Angie's body was left at the crime scene. The investigation stalled after a 9-hour interrogation of Roger failed to yield results. Although his fingerprints were taken and compared to those on the tape from Angie's head, no match was found, leading to his release due to insufficient evidence. The case remained stagnant until 2018 when the St. Louis Police Department established a dedicated task force to re-examine the evidence using advanced technology. The team focused on 3 crucial pieces of evidence: the handcuffs, the tape from Angie's head, and the underwear used to silence her. Despite previous failed attempts to find the perpetrator's DNA on these items, the detectives were determined to try again. They began by re-examining the handcuffs but encountered difficulties due to the presence of Angie's blood. They then turned their attention to the tape from Angie's head but discovered it had deteriorated over time, meaningless their efforts. The investigators examined the underwear as a last resort, despite low expectations due to it being in Angie's mouth for several hours, which could have erased any foreign DNA. Using advanced technology, they thoroughly inspected every inch of the underwear and eventually found a tiny sample of unfamiliar DNA, sufficient for analysis. The DNA was confirmed to belong to a male and was immediately uploaded to the FBI database. In cases like this, it's common for the DNA not to match anyone in the database, requiring further efforts to identify the person. However, in this instance, the detectives got lucky. As soon as the DNA sample was uploaded, they received a match. The DNA belonged to 58-year-old Earl Cox, who had been in prison since 2003. Cox was not on police radar in connection with Angie's case, but he had a significant criminal record. His first stint in prison was in 1982, during his military service in Germany, where he worked as a part-time babysitter. However, his babysitting job ended when 4 girls accused him of sexual assault. Cox initially received an 8-year prison sentence in the United States but was released after serving only 3 years. Following his release, he relocated to St. Louis. However, his freedom was short-lived as he was arrested again 4 years later when 2 7-year-old girls accused him of sexual assault. Although the charges were eventually dropped due to lack of evidence, but he violated his parole, resulting in an additional year in prison. After his release in 1992, Cox moved to St. Louis to live with his relatives. The following year, he allegedly abducted and murdered Angie. In 2002, Cox was arrested again, this time for operating a major online platform where users shared child abuse materials. The FBI had been investigating the platform and caught Cox in a sting operation when he attempted to meet an undercover agent posing as a 14-year-old girl. Cox had planned to make the girl his slave and had sent her money for a bus ticket. However, when he arrived at the meeting place, he was met by armed FBI agents and arrested. A search of his computer revealed over 45,000 images of child abuse, as well as evidence that he was the mastermind behind the online platform. This led to the arrest of 60 more individuals associated with the site, marking one of the largest operations against pedophiles in the country. In 2003, Cox was sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, when his term ended, a judge used a legal loophole to keep him detained, citing him as a serious threat to children. He remained in prison until 2019, when his DNA sample matched the DNA sample from Angie's case. Detectives visited Cox in prison to discuss the match, but he denied any involvement and requested a lawyer. Given the strong DNA evidence against him, the police knew Cox's chances of winning in court were slim. Instead of pursuing a trial, investigators contacted Earl's lawyer with a proposal. In exchange for Cox's confession to Angie's murder, the prosecution would drop the death penalty and seek a life sentence instead. Aware of the strong evidence against him, Cox agreed to the deal. Detectives returned to the prison to hear Cox's account of the events. Although some parts of his story seemed unlikely, the crucial aspect for investigators was his admission to the murder. Cox claimed that on November 18, 1993, he was driving near his mother's and sister's neighborhood when his car broke down in the middle of the road. When he tried to examine the car, a school bus stopped, and several children got off. The children went into their homes, except for one girl, Angie. According to Cox, Angie approached him, and they briefly talked. He noticed she was cold, so he offered her a ride in his car, which she allegedly accepted. Cox then took Angie to Burger King to eat and later brought her to his home, where he claimed to have sexually assaulted her over several days. Eventually, Cox decided to get rid of Angie, taking her to the location where her body would later be found. He tied her to a tree, claiming she was still alive at that moment. Detectives were skeptical about certain parts of Cox's story. Angie was unlikely to get into a car with a stranger, given the short distance to her home. The investigators also questioned the car breakdown in Cox's story. He claimed the car stalled, but it started again when Angie approached. It's more likely that the perpetrator targeted Angie and decided to abduct her. This hypothesis seems more plausible than Cox's account. The detectives got what they needed, a confession to the murder. In August 2020, Cox was sentenced to life in prison without parole. A judge handed down the sentence. Unfortunately, Angie's mother didn't live to see justice served. She died of cancer in 2016. Angie's father, Ronald, told reporters that Cox was responsible for his wife's death and should have been tried for 2 murders. A woman's life was forever changed after the loss of her daughter. She lost all interest in life and eventually passed away. Cox's story, however, took a different turn. The prosecutor reopened a case involving the sexual abuse of 2 7-year-old girls, for which Cox had previously received a lenient sentence of 1 year in prison for violating his parole. The police reached out to one of Cox's victims, now an adult, and asked her to testify against him. Cox ultimately admitted to his crimes and was given an additional 10 years prison sentence. In court, his victim spoke out, saying that despite Cox's terrible actions, but she would go on to live a happy and fulfilling life, while Cox would spend the rest of his life in prison. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sheil Coughlin. Sheil Coughlin grew up on the west side of Manhattan. Shelley's life was marked by a love of learning and academic excellence, earning a degree in wealth management. This degree opened the door to a successful career in Swiss banking. Sheil's career flourished, and she became skilled at managing multi-million-dollar portfolios for her clients. However, despite her professional success and financial security, Sheil felt unfulfilled. She longed to start a family of her own and become a mother. In an effort to change her circumstances, Sheil attended a Jewish singles event in February 1998, where she met a 26-year-old man named Rod Coughlin, who also worked in the banking sector. Sheil and Rod were a young couple with many similar interests and ambitions. Their relationship developed quickly despite their significant age difference. They spent all their time together and then decided to get married, feeling that everything was just right. Some people thought they were rushing into marriage, but for Sheil and Rod, it was perfect. They had 2 beautiful children, a boy and a girl, and their family was complete. However, their happy life was shattered on New Year's Eve 2009 when Sheil died in a tragic accident. At first, the police thought it was just a freak accident. On December 30th, 2009, 2 police officers were finishing their night shift at a Manhattan police station. They received an emergency call from Rod Coughlin, Sheil's husband, who had called in a panic to report that he had found Sheil in her bathtub, submerged in blood, and that she was dead. He followed the police's instructions to pull her out of the water and attempt to resuscitate her. However, it soon became clear that his efforts to save her life would not be successful. As Sheil's body was cold and motionless, Rod Coughlin covered her with a blanket and waited for the police to arrive. Police quickly arrived and investigated the scene. Upon arrival, they assessed the situation and blocked off a downtown Manhattan street. Initially, officers suspected that Sheil's death may have been a suicide. Inside the apartment, the police found scattered children's toys. Proceeding to the bathroom, they discovered the Sheil wrapped in a blanket by her husband. The bloody water in the tub and the wet floor indicated that Rod Coughlin had recently pulled the body from the water. A bleeding wound on the back of Sheil's head was visible. Police found a torn hinge on the cabinet in the bathroom where Sheil died, suggesting she fell after losing her grip on the doorknob. Experts concluded there was no forced entry after checking around the house. The detective working the case decided to talk to the family members. During the interview, it was discovered that Sheil and Rod Coughlin's 9-year-old daughter was the first to discover her mother's body. Traumatized and shocked by what she saw, she told the police what had happened. It turned out that the night before, she and her younger brother had slept in their mother's bed. Waking up in the middle of the night and realizing that her mother was not there, she went looking for her and stumbled upon the horrifying scene in the bathroom. She quickly called her father, Rod Coughlin, who had recently separated from his mother and was downstairs. He rushed into the bathroom, pulled his wife's body out of the water, and called emergency services. Her account of the events matched Rod Coughlin's, supporting the theory that her death was an accident. The police informed Sheil's family of the tragic event, leaving everyone in shock. An autopsy and forensic examination were scheduled for the following day. When the medical examiner contacted investigators to begin the examination, he was surprised to learn that this procedure would not take place, despite being necessary. This left the examiner confused. It was later discovered that a rabbi from Sheil's synagogue had intervened. The rabbi contacted an organization responsible for burying Orthodox Jews, who then asked the police for permission to enter the scene in accordance with the family's religious rites. The police granted permission and a team of rabbis arrived at the scene. They cleaned up the blood in the bathtub and prepared Sheil's body for burial in accordance with the family's beliefs. Unfortunately, this process destroyed all evidence and clues before they could be examined by the police forensic department. Orthodox Jewish tradition considers autopsies unacceptable because they involve defiling the body of the deceased. The rabbi quickly stepped in to support Sheil's grieving family, who were grateful for the rabbi's help. As a result, the family agreed to forego an autopsy and organize funeral arrangements. Sheil was buried within 24 hours, with hundreds of people attending to pay their respects. Sheil's parents questioned the cause of Sheil's death. Police told them that potential evidence had been destroyed during the cleanup. They thought that a fall in the bathtub would certainly have caused the accident. But the possibility of death from such an accident seemed unlikely. The family hired a private investigator to investigate the circumstances of her death and determine whether it was indeed an accident. The private investigator begins by going to the family home to talk to Sheil's relatives, and learns that Sheil's marriage to Rod Coughlin is having major problems. Their marriage began to fall apart after their 10th wedding anniversary in 2008. Rod Coughlin frequently changed jobs and developed a gambling addiction, spending a lot of money on gambling. Sheil felt neglected because Rod Coughlin spent a lot of time playing video games. Sheil was also frustrated by the amount of money Rod Coughlin's family spent on his frequent trips, and he was unfaithful to her. Sheil, after discovering his email cheating, she decided to end their marriage and began the process of getting a religious divorce. However, the formal divorce process will take some time to complete. Although they are separated and experiencing strain in their relationship, they has tried to maintain their relationship for the sake of their children. Despite this effort, conflicts and disagreements between Sheil and Rod Coughlin continue to arise. Sheil had recently confided in her loved ones about her grievances with Rod Coughlin, characterizing him as aggressive and hot-tempered. She felt uneasy and monitored. The private detective suspected that Rod Coughlin might have been involved in his wife Sheil's death due to the complexities in their marital life. To investigate further, the detective aimed to determine if a crime had occurred at the scene where Sheil's body was found. He planned to inspect her apartment, but the door was sealed, requiring him to obtain a court order to gain access. Upon arriving at the scene with New York police officers, the detective attempted to unlock the door with a provided key, but it wouldn't budge. Just then, Rod Coughlin appeared from his apartment, claiming he had heard a noise and came to investigate. When questioned by the police and the detective, Rod Coughlin took the key and easily opened the door. This raised suspicions. Had Rod Coughlin genuinely heard a noise, or was he deliberately keeping an eye on the situation? The detective searched the apartment for evidence of murder. Sheil's family said she was home on December 31st, but her phone was missing. A phone charger was found, but not the phone that he paid particular attention to the hinges, which investigators believed she had ripped off during a fall. The more he examined them, the more he suspected that, with Sheil's strength, ripping off hinges that were firmly attached to the cabinet was impossible. The detective discussed his findings with the police, trying to convince them that Sheil's death was not an accident, but a murder. However, the police remained unconvinced, citing a lack of evidence. Therefore, they decided to perform an autopsy to conclusively determine the cause of death. This decision caused a difficult debate with Sheil's family. The exhumation took place 2 weeks after Sheil had been buried. Her loved ones were deeply distressed by the decision. In the Jewish faith, exhumation is considered negative and many religious leaders oppose the practice. The family needed time to think about their next steps. They felt the need to find out the truth about their daughter's death, so they agreed to exhume her body. However, the exhumation process was difficult, so the family had to apply for a special order from the prosecutor's office. Even with the family's consent, they still had to make sure that all the necessary paperwork was completed. Once all the paperwork was completed, they proceeded with the exhumation and autopsy. The autopsy results showed that Sheil did not die from a fall, but from strangulation, which caused her to suffocate and break her neck. The official cause of Sheil's death was revised, and it was no longer considered an accident. Instead, it was officially ruled a murder. The detective's suspicions and efforts were vindicated. The autopsy results were instrumental in prompting the New York Police Department to reopen the investigation into Sheil's death. Detectives began scrutinizing new evidence, including phone records and bank statements. They also interviewed everyone who had interacted with Rod Coughlin and Sheil. The attorney shared information about Rod Coughlin and Sheil during the first divorce hearing in May 2009. Rod Coughlin claimed that he could not afford the money because he was unemployed, but the judge said that he had to give up gambling and electronics. In court, Rod Coughlin's true nature was exposed, and he continued to criticize Sheil, making false accusations about her lifestyle, finances, and behavior toward their son. He even called Shields' workplace to defame her. In the subsequent divorce hearing on July 7, 2009, the court banned Rod Coughlin from spending time alone with the children, a ban that remained in place even after Shields' death. The court also denied Rod Coughlin custody of the children and awarded custody to Rod Coughlin's parents through a social worker. This decision likely angered Rod Coughlin greatly. Police interviewed a former caregiver who had cared for Rod Coughlin's children before he fired her. It was discovered that on December 30th, Shields had received an expensive keratin hair treatment that cost hundreds of dollars. The care instructions emphasized avoiding humidity in high temperatures for several days, essentially prohibiting baths or showers. Shields' autopsy revealed no signs of bathing on the day of her death, leading investigators to speculate that she may not have taken a bath. Detectives reviewed surveillance footage from the building, which showed Rod Coughlin leaving his apartment at 4 a.m. on the day of the murder, dressed to go out. He returned a short time later. The building's security guard found this unusual, as Rod had never left the building that early. The security guard asked Rod Coughlin if he needed anything, but when he said no, Rod Coughlin returned with the chocolate bars and gave them to the security guard. Investigators believed that Rod Coughlin's actions were intentional to create an alibi, and as a result, he became the prime suspect. Shields and Rod Coughlin were still married, which meant that absent a will or divorce, Rod Coughlin would inherit her estate, which was worth over $5 million. Additionally, on December 31, 2009, Shields scheduled a meeting with her attorney to update her will and remove Rod Coughlin from the list of beneficiaries, which posed a significant threat to Rod Coughlin's rights and provided a clear motive for the crime. All of Shields' assets were frozen in a safe deposit account. It is likely that Rod Coughlin knew about Shields' plans to remove his name from her will, as he may have been monitoring her activities. A review of the surveillance footage revealed that Shields had returned home at 8 p.m. the night before the crime, talking on her phone. However, the phone had gone missing after the crime. The investigators decided to conduct another search of the crime scene, and upon returning to the apartment, they quickly found Shields' mobile phone lying on her bedside table, still connected to the charger. When questioned by the police, Rod Coughlin hired a lawyer, Ed, who advised him to remain silent. As a result, investigators had to continue searching for new evidence implicating Rod Coughlin. When they examined Rod Coughlin's phone records, they discovered frequent calls to the number of Deborah Holmes, a married woman with 3 children. 5 months before Shields' murder, Rod Coughlin and Deborah met at a sick bow tournament and began a passionate affair. They often met at sick bow tournaments or played together online. Investigators saw an opportunity to gather information and decided to contact Deborah with a few questions. However, to their surprise, Deborah responded that her attorney had asked her not to cooperate. Faced with Deborah's refusal to speak, the police asked for the name of her attorney. The response revealed that Deborah and Rod Coughlin were the same attorney. As a last resort, the police searched Shields' newly discovered phone for incriminating text messages or electronic communications between Rod and Deborah. All data had been completely erased by a professional. Even skilled programmers were unable to recover the deleted messages. Over time, it became clear that he had succeeded in evading justice. While his crimes may have been well executed, the rabbi's meticulous cleaning of the bathroom was a major factor in hampering the investigation. By removing all traces of blood and other evidence, they destroyed DNA, making it increasingly difficult for investigators to collect evidence. The case stalled because Rod Coughlin confessed to the crime, and a lack of evidence prevented the case from going to trial. 5 years have passed since the investigation into Shields' death began, but no arrests have been made. Police have searched for clues and evidence of Rod Coughlin's involvement in Shields' death for years, but to no avail. However, the case took a turn when Rod Coughlin's mistress, Deborah, came forward. She contacted the police, and they invited her to the station for questioning. Deborah had recently broken up with Rod Coughlin, which prompted her to contact the police. She shared information with the police that Rod Coughlin had conspired to gain custody of the children, but because he was a suspect in Shield's death and did not have custody of the children, he could not access the money Shield left behind. Rod Coughlin hatched a sinister plan to get his hands on Shield's fortune. Rod Coughlin planned to manipulate his 15-year-old daughter into falsely accusing her grandfather, Rod Coughlin's father, of assaulting her. This would result in the grandfather being imprisoned and losing custody of his granddaughter, and Rod Coughlin would give his daughter a large sum of money upon completion of the mission. Meanwhile, Rod Coughlin had been secretly withdrawing funds from the only account he had access to, which was meant for his children's education. His parents discovered that he was misusing the money and were extremely unhappy with his lack of concern for his children's well-being. This led to a heated dispute between Rod Coughlin and his parents. Rod Coughlin's anger towards his parents escalated to the point where he considered harming them. In 2012, he confided in his lover, Deborah, about his plan to have his daughter poison his parents' tea with rat poison. He believed that since his daughter was a minor, she would receive a lighter sentence if caught. Following this, Rod Coughlin came up with several other schemes. He considered burning down his parents' house and trapping them inside by jamming the doors. Rod Coughlin also thought about arranging a fake marriage for his daughter to a Mexican man, which would have forced her to give up part of her inheritance to him. The police were shocked by the details of Rod Coughlin's plans. Deborah secretly collected evidence, storing a large amount of data on hard drives. Deborah realized she was dealing with a psychopath, and she waited until after she broke up with Rod Coughlin to share the evidence with the police. The recordings she collected of Rod Coughlin's conversations with various people. The police now had to listen carefully to these recordings to find conclusive evidence. Deborah's contribution to the investigation was crucial. As the investigators analyzed the recordings, they made a surprising discovery. In a conversation with a friend he met through backgammon, Rod Coughlin casually mentioned that he had keys to Shield's apartment and could enter it at any time. Investigators found that Rod Coughlin was plotting against his own daughter, planning to pin the responsibility for the Shield's demise on her. Thanks to all the information gathered, the police finally had compelling evidence to charge Rod Coughlin with the demise of his wife. On November 1, 2015, Rod Coughlin was arrested. Shield's family awaited the trial of their daughter's perpetrator, but victory was not assured. Rod Coughlin, while incarcerated, shared intimate details of his wife's murder with a fellow inmate. He even reenacted the strangulation, which matched the autopsy results. During the 7-week trial, the jury heard testimony about the heinous crimes he planned to commit, including murdering his wife, targeting his parents, and framing his own children. The jury was horrified by his cold-blooded nature. In March 2019, the court convicted Rod Coughlin of murdering his wife, Shield. Although there was no direct eyewitness, the overwhelming evidence led to a life imprisonment sentence. With the possibility of parole after 25 years, Rod Coughlin will no longer pose a threat to his family or the people of New York. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Catherine Wells Burr. Catherine Wells Burr was born in 1989 in the United Kingdom to parents Phil and Jane Wells Burr. She has an older sister named Lynn. In the summer of 2010, Catherine met Ronald Novak, a 31-year-old co-worker, on a university break while working on a new vacuum cleaner production line. Ronald was an immigrant from Poland with a previous marriage and a son, had moved to England 4 years earlier seeking a better life. Ronald and Catherine started dating, initially meeting for lunch at the production site cafe, but soon progressing to romantic dinners. Ronald showered Catherine with gifts, took Catherine to movies, and went on walks with Catherine. As their relationship deepened, Ronald shared his past and reasons for moving to the UK with Catherine. Raffle's trustworthy nature allows her to open up completely to him. Within a few months, Catherine introduced Raffle to her parents, who welcomed him into their family and hoped for Raffle and Catherine's future happiness. Soon, Raffle and Catherine began planning their wedding. Catherine graduated with honors from Bath Spa University in 2011 and secured a promising job as a business analyst at Pneumatic International, the manufacturer of Henry vacuum cleaners. Her career progressed quickly, helping her have good job opportunities. Catherine is smart, highly educated, and has good interaction skills with others. She shows genuine interest in her co-workers' problems and cares for those around her. Her kind demeanor and radiant smile have earned her the admiration of her colleagues, who view her as a young leader. Catherine's career was advancing swiftly, and her substantial earnings, combined with those of her partner Raffle, allowed them to purchase a spacious home with a terrace in Willow Way. Although they were financially secure, they opted to take out a mortgage, securing insurance coverage as per their agreement with the bank. With their youth, successful careers, and love for each other, it seemed they had all the ingredients for happiness. However, the fateful day of September 12, 2012, marked a turning point in their lives, changing everything forever. On September 12, 2012, Orlando, a local resident, was driving home after a night shift at the gas station. He is in a hurry to take his daughter Maria to kindergarten as he promised his wife. While driving, he noticed black smoke coming from a nearby parking lot after turning a sharp corner. Smoke billowed from a car engulfed in flames. Orlando stopped and tried to get a closer look but couldn't due to the intense fire. When firefighters arrived 4 minutes later, the car was completely burned out. The police cordoned off the area to keep onlookers away. The location was relatively deserted due to the early hour, and there were no witnesses to the incident. Upon investigation, a charred body was found. The police needed to identify the victim and determine the cause of death. There were no signs of a car accident or any evidence of another vehicle being involved. The police initially suspected that the car may have caught fire due to a malfunction or self-ignition. A thorough investigation was conducted, involving multiple expert analyses. The remains were sent to a forensic laboratory to determine the identity and cause of death. The police also examined fragments of the burned vehicle to identify any malfunctions and establish the cause of the fire. The police began by checking the missing persons database and recent reports of disappearances. They quickly identified the deceased as 23-year-old Catherine Wells Barr. On the same day, Raffle Novak filed a missing persons report for his girlfriend, Catherine. According to Raffle, he left for work at 5:30 a.m. while Catherine was still asleep. When she failed to show up for work, and Raffle couldn't find her at any of her relatives' homes, he contacted the police. The investigation involved interviewing the victim's family, including her parents and sister, as well as Raffle, her colleagues, and friends. By gathering information about the last days and years of Catherine's life, the police were able to reconstruct the events leading up to her tragic death. The investigation into Catherine's disappearance continued to uncover shocking details about her life with Raffle. As the truth began to emerge, it became clear that their relationship had been built on lies from the start. Raffle, a 29-year-old man from Poland, had left his wife and child behind to escape his debts. He moved to the UK, where he met Anna Lavick, with whom he had a long-term relationship starting in 2008. When Raffle met Catherine, he initially maintained relationships with both women. However, he eventually chose Catherine, believing she offered more stability and financial security. Catherine, unaware of Raffle's true intentions, genuinely desired a happy marriage and family with him. Meanwhile, Raffle was secretly planning to kill Catherine, intending to use the life insurance payout and the large house they shared to fund a new life with his mistress, Anna. The murder was carefully planned and executed with exceptional cruelty. On the day Catherine went missing, Raffel waited a few hours before reporting her disappearance to her boss, pretending to be frantically worried about her whereabouts. He feigned panic and despair in front of Catherine's colleagues and relatives, claiming she had been receiving threatening letters from a mentally unstable admirer. When Catherine's car was found missing and she was not at her parents' home or her own, Raffel's fake concern led Catherine's family to contact the police. Raffel recounted that the evening before her disappearance had been a normal evening. Raffel and Catherine went for a walk, bought groceries, had dinner, watched TV, and went to bed together. Catherine seemed calm. However, a thorough investigation revealed that her death occurred earlier. She was strangled around 2 a.m., likely in her own bed while asleep. Her body was placed in the car, driven a short distance, and set on fire to destroy evidence. Raffel Novak had a solid alibi, as he was at work from 5:30 a.m. He claimed Catherine was asleep in bed when he left. The burning car was discovered between 6 and 7 a.m. However, Raffel was still at home at 1:30 a.m., which significantly altered the case's direction. As a result, Raffel Novak became the prime suspect in Catherine Wells Burr's murder. The evidence allowed for Raffel to be detained pending further investigation. Raffel claimed that Catherine was being stalked, which had caused her significant distress. However, during the investigation, it was discovered that Catherine had a secret online life. She had accounts on several adult websites, where she shared intimate photos and engaged in flirtatious conversations with men. A letter from a secret admirer was also found. Despite attempts to mislead the investigation, evidence was uncovered that proved Raffel's direct involvement in Catherine's demise. Notably, Raffel had a motive to kill Catherine. Investigators found that he had been in continuous communication with Anna Legwinowicz, and they had met regularly over the past few months. Furthermore, it was discovered that Raffel had a financial motive. Shortly before Catherine's death, they had both taken out life insurance policies worth £123,000. Raffel and Catherine were the sole beneficiaries of each other's policies, meaning they would receive the payouts in the event of the other's death. The main motive behind Catherine's death and the burning of her car to mislead the investigation was found to be a large life insurance payout. On the day she went missing, Catherine sent a message to Anna's phone. Additionally, security cameras showed Anna and her uncle filling a gas can at a gas station a few days before the crime. This new information brought a third person into the investigation. Anna Legwinowicz, 32, and her uncle, Tadeusz Dimitrison, 38, along with Raffel Novak, are suspected of being accomplices in a premeditated crime and arson to cover up evidence. The crime was carefully planned by them over several months. They created accounts on adult websites, uploaded doctored images of Catherine, and created chats with various men to mislead the investigation. When faced with undeniable evidence, Raffel and Anna couldn't deny their involvement any longer and began blaming each other. Raffel claimed that Anna, driven by jealousy, planned and carried out the crime to eliminate Catherine. In contrast, Anna accused Raffel of committing the crime out of greed, seeking to secure the insurance payout for the house. To avoid detection, the conspirators forged much evidence related to Catherine. They created fake profiles about Catherine on dating websites, portraying her as a promiscuous and highly sexual woman. Also, to cover their tracks, the conspirators burned Catherine's body and created a fake story about her. They invented a fictitious lover, and they believed that he might be responsible for Catherine's death. One of the conspirators even sent a text message from Catherine's phone to this fictitious person, suggesting that she was on her way to meet him. However, forensic experts discovered that when the fire broke out, Catherine was only wearing her favorite nightgown, not an appropriate outfit to meet someone. Despite the evidence, Raffel refused to acknowledge his involvement in Catherine's death. Instead, he told Jane, Catherine's mother that her daughter was receiving threatening emails and text messages from an ex-boyfriend who said if he couldn't have her, no one could. Ronald also claimed that Catherine had spoken of taking her own life. In a shocking display of deceit, Ronald allowed Catherine's parents to comfort him, believing he was also mourning the loss of Catherine he loved. Ronald's acting was incredibly convincing. After Catherine's death, her mother, Jane, was so taken in by his performance that she hugged him and allowed him to call her mom. Jane explained that in the early stages of the investigation, the police viewed Ronald more as a witness than a suspect, so she decided to offer him her full support. Her reasoning was that if Catherine had loved him that much and he was considered part of their family, then he deserved their support. The trial, chaired by Justice Sharp, began and the jury heard that Ronald and his two co-defendants stood to gain a significant amount from Catherine's death. They hoped to receive a life insurance payout of £123,000 and half ownership of a two-bedroom home in Mangold, Somerset, valued at £137,000. During the trial, it was revealed that when police found Catherine's body in her burned car on the morning of September 12, Ronald showed no emotion. Anna Legwinowicz frequently shook her head and laughed in court when it was suggested she was responsible for the crime, but refused to testify. Tadevs also chose not to testify in his defense. The judge, Justice Sharp, told the defendants the murder was a horrific and merciless crime. The defendants showed no emotion during sentencing. The judge described Anna Legwinowicz's behavior as deceitful, manipulative, and cruel, and stated she played a significant role in the crime. He also told Tadevs that the murder was committed for gain, with many aggravating circumstances and no mitigating ones. The judge expressed deep sympathy for Catherine's parents, who had no idea that Ronald Novak's charming facade hid a monster. Ronald's actions were driven by financial gain, as he had no emotional ties to Catherine. Catherine's mother stated that the brutal and calculated manner of her daughter's death would haunt them forever. She regretted not having the chance to say goodbye or express her love, and now considers Ronald an evil person who deserves to spend the rest of his life in prison. Catherine's father, Philip, added that they had welcomed Ronald into their home, treating him like a son, only to be betrayed by him. During the trial, Ronald Novak became emotional in the witness box. He denied any involvement in the death of his girlfriend, Catherine Wells Burr. Ronald claimed everyone was blaming him for a crime he did not commit. However, the court heard that Ronald showed no emotion when the police discovered Catherine's body in her burned-out car on September 12 last year. Catherine's mother, Jane Wells Burr, testified that after his initial release from police custody, Ronald asked for a steak dinner and didn't even mention Catherine. Jane Wells Burr stated that her daughter's fate was sealed when she and Ronald bought a house together and took out a life insurance policy. She believes that in signing the contract, Catherine also signed her own death warrant. Ultimately, the court found Ronald Novak guilty of suffocating Catherine with a pillow while she slept. He had conspired with his secret lover, Anna Legwinowicz, and her uncle, Tadevs, to claim a £123,000 life insurance payout and a share of the house. Anna and Tadevs had transported Catherine's body in her car to a remote location and set it on fire. Ronald and Anna were sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 32 years, while Tadevs received a 27-year sentence. After the verdict, Catherine's parents, Philip and Jane Wells Burr, advocated for stricter immigration laws. They believed that if the UK had more stringent immigration rules, like the US, Ronald Novak would not have been allowed entry. Ronald had previously been convicted of assaulting his wife in Poland. Philip and Jane, who divorced after Catherine's death, blamed the European Union for the UK's lenient immigration policies. Jane stated that the UK does not thoroughly check people entering the country. She was unaware of Ronald's previous assault charge in Poland and believes the government needs to prevent individuals like Ronald from freely entering the country. Following the verdict, Catherine's mother paid tribute to her daughter, describing her as a beautiful, determined, and hard-working individual who earned a first-class degree from the University of Bath Spa. Catherine's family expressed their devastation and loss, stating they were proud of her accomplishments and had no idea how to move forward without her. They believed she had great potential and a promising life ahead, but it was cruelly taken away from her and her loved ones. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Kat West. Kat West was born on February 15, 1975, in the small town of Davie, Florida. She was the only child of Nancy and John Jonathan Martin. As a child, Kat always wanted a sibling, but her mother's health problems made that impossible. This has made Kat West so attached to her dolls, she treats them like living creatures, sings to them and cherishes them. Kat West was a popular student in school, admired for her good looks and friendly personality. She was very active in extracurricular activities, particularly sports and dance. However, during the teenage years, signs of bipolar affective disorder begin to appear, characterized by depression and anxiety, alternating with periods of hyperactivity, persistently elevated mood and agitation. Only later did her parents realize their daughter's condition, but it was too late. By then, she had turned to alcohol to cope with her emotions. It wasn't until she sought treatment for her addiction that doctors discovered the underlying issue, a bipolar disorder. Despite overcoming her dependency on alcohol, managing her bipolar disorder proved to be a much more daunting task. She was on multiple medications, which caused unpleasant side effects and made her feel unwell. Eventually, the disorder was brought under control, but Kat West had to continue taking medication. Kat West wants to get married and have children, but her personal life is full of hardship, possibly due to her past mental illness and addiction. However, Kat West is a charismatic and attractive person, has many admirers, is often the life of the party and shines in the spotlight. Growing up, Kat West aspired to be a model. She actively pursued her goal, spending time attending auditions and exploring different looks. She was especially attracted to Marilyn Monroe, an actress of the style of the 1950s. Kat West has watched many of Monroe's films, collected her posters and imitated her style and image. Interestingly, Kat West bore a resemblance to her idol, which she proudly acknowledged and cherished. Although her dream of becoming a famous model didn't come true, Kat West's photos were frequently published in local magazines, earning her some recognition, a fan base, and occasional recognition on the streets of her hometown. At the age of 28, she met her life partner, William Jeffrey West. William was born in 1970 in Alabama, came from a typical family. From a young age, he had aspirations of a career in the military or law enforcement. As a diligent student and active sports enthusiast, he was robust, fit, and incredibly focused. In the early 1990s, William joined the U.S. military, initially serving as a military police officer. His dedication led to a promotion as a military recruiter, responsible for enlisting individuals into the Army and Navy. He was eventually promoted to head of a recruiting unit, spending 20 years of his life in military service. William pursued higher education alongside his military career, earning a bachelor's degree in public relations from the University of South Carolina. He then went on to study criminal justice, eventually earning a master's degree. William is a calm and goal-oriented person who likes to keep a low profile. He was a devoted family man, marrying young and having 2 children. After retiring from the military, he became a corporal in the police department of a university town, where he was responsible for ensuring the safety of the campus community. He approached his duties with seriousness and responsibility, never having to use his service firearm throughout his career. Kat West and William first met in the mid-2000s, when William was still serving in the military and married to his first wife. Despite their vastly different personalities, William is a quiet and serious military man, and Kat West is a bubbly and outgoing blonde, and they feel an immediate attraction to each other. In 2004, William, a married man at the time, met Kat West. Despite their 5-year age gap and Kat West struggles with alcohol addiction, but they quickly fell in love. William soon filed for divorce to be with Kat West, and in less than 5 months, they got married in Las Vegas in 2005. After getting married, they welcomed their first child, a daughter named Lola. They moved to Sarah, Alabama, William's home state, where Kat designed their custom-built home, adorning their bedroom with portraits of her idol, Marilyn Monroe. Neighbors described the Williams as a happy couple, despite their very different personalities. Kat West was known for her bold fashion sense, always striving to look stunning and attractive. She loved being the center of attention, often seeking compliments and admiring glances. In contrast, William appeared more reserved and serious, a trait likely developed during his long military career. Kat West's life is a complete contrast to her glamorous appearance and her everyday reality as a housewife. Despite her efforts to make it big in modeling, her career failed to take off after her marriage and the birth of her daughter. Focusing on creating a cozy home and raising her children became her top priorities. However, her domestic life wasn't fulfilling, and she yearned for attention and recognition. With the emergence of social media in the late 2000s, she began sharing pictures online. She was inspired by Barbie and Marilyn Monroe, but gradually became more daring and provocative. Her husband was surprisingly supportive of her new hobby, often serving as her photographer. Eventually, the hobby became a profitable business, earning her income through paid subscriptions. A typical evening found they shopping for prepared seafood, fine brandy, and absinthe from a local supermarket. They would pick out scented candles from a nearby store to set the mood for a romantic evening. Surveillance cameras caught them seemingly carefree and happy as they made their purchases, unaware of the tragedy that was about to happen. After a fun dinner and a few drinks, Kat West began transforming into her online persona, Kitty Kat. She asked Williams to take some intimate photos of her, first in lingerie and then without clothes. Williams agreed and took several revealing shots, which were later posted on Kat West's private online profile, accessible only to her fans. A romantic evening that seemed to end in a night of passion instead led to a tragic ending. The next morning, January 13th, around 5 a.m., a young neighbor of the Williams was on her way to work. Although the sun had not yet risen, it was light enough outside for her to notice something unusual as she passed the Williams house. At first, she didn't realize what it was, but as she slowed down, she saw a nearly naked woman lying motionless on the road. She also thought she saw someone standing on the doorstep of the house, but they quickly disappeared into the shadows when they noticed her approaching. During questioning, the neighbor was unable to definitively state whether she saw Kat West's attacker enter the house or flee down the street. The neighbor, who was shocked and unsure of what to do, hesitated to approach the body. After returning home, she informed her parents, and together they called emergency services to report the distressing discovery. At the operator's request, the neighbor reluctantly approached the body while waiting for help to arrive. She identified the body as Kat West and checked for a pulse, but unfortunately, there was none. Kat West's body was cold and stiff. Kat West was found lying face down on the sidewalk, wearing only a bright pink bra top. There was a pool of blood under her head. Nearby was a bottle of wormwood wine with some of the wine spilled on the road and blood stains on the bottle. A short distance away lay her smashed smartphone. Due to the quiet residential area, there were no other witnesses to the incident, which remains shrouded in mystery. Kat West's car was last seen around 8:30 p.m. and the time her body was discovered at 5 a.m. A key figure who may be able to shed some light on the events is Kat West's husband, Mr. Williams. The investigation is ongoing, with Detective Michael Melhoff being one of the first to arrive at the scene. When the detective arrived at the house where Cat West's body was found, Williams answered the door. He seemed anxious but claimed he didn't know what was going on. When asked about his wife's whereabouts, Williams said he had just woken up and couldn't find her in bed. The detective then told him that a woman's body, identified by neighbors as Cat West, had been found near the house. The man put on a jacket and followed the detective outside, where he confirmed that the body was indeed his wife. However, his reaction was surprisingly calm. He didn't show any extreme emotions, such as crying or screaming, which raised some suspicions. When questioned about his whereabouts and activities during the night, he said he had slept soundly because they had been drinking the previous evening. When asked what he thought might have happened to his wife, he simply shrugged and suggested it could have been an accident. The man also shared some information about his wife's medical history. He said she had bipolar disorder and took medication for it. He also mentioned that she struggled with alcohol and sometimes behaved erratically when she was drunk. He noted that she would occasionally jump on their backyard trampoline, but sometimes missed it and injured herself. A search of the house did not turn up any signs of a struggle or violence. However, some items in the kitchen suggested a recent gathering. 2 plates with leftover food, 2 glasses, and a half-empty brandy bottle were on the kitchen table. Under the table, police found Cat West's high heels and a pair of panties the same color as her bra lying on the floor. However, some bloody napkins in the trash and an open bottle of detergent raised suspicions. Williams claimed that on the evening in question, Cat West had been drinking heavily, which he disliked. After a photo session, he wanted to move to the bedroom for a more intimate setting. He took a short shower and returned to find Cat West still sitting at the table, drinking absinthe straight from the bottle and texting someone on her phone. Williams was angry that she ignored his requests to put away her phone, and he tried to take it from her. A minor scuffle ensued, during which he accidentally elbowed Cat West's face, causing her nose to bleed. Williams explained that the blood on the discarded napkins could have been the blood from his wife's nose that night. He stated that he took the phone from his wife and threw it out the door. Believing his wife would calm down and join him in bed, he claimed to have been unaware of what happened next until the police arrived at his door asking about Cat West. Williams speculated that his wife might have gone outside to retrieve her phone and brought the absinthe bottle with her to finish it. He suggested 2 possible scenarios: 1, that she fell, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and froze to death, or 2, that someone attacked her. However, he could not explain why his wife went out wearing only a bra without any clothes. He attributed this behavior to her being intoxicated from the absinthe. Williams's story raised suspicions due to its inconsistencies and lack of detail, which he attributed to intoxication. However, the investigation was hampered by lack of evidence and no witnesses. The autopsy revealed that the 42-year-old woman died from a severe head injury, likely caused by the absinthe bottle found nearby, combined with hypothermia. Her blood alcohol level was extremely high, suggesting severe intoxication can impair breathing and increase the risk of loss of consciousness. Initially, it seemed that the circumstances of Cat West's death were straightforward. She had been heavily intoxicated, gone outside to search for her phone, and taken the unfinished bottle of absinthe with her. It appeared that she might have lost her balance while reaching for her phone, fallen, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and ultimately died from the injury and exposure. The presence of the blood-stained bottle near her head and the phone nearby seemed to support this scenario. Yet, the investigation discovered that this explanation was overly simplistic and potentially staged. Experts determined that the head injury was caused by the bottle found next to the body. However, forensic analysis revealed that if the victim had fallen by herself, the bottle would likely have rolled away from her head, rather than remaining parallel to it. The bottle was found to have both Cat West's and her husband Williams's fingerprints on it, as well as some unidentified smudged prints. Further investigation led to a different conclusion. The theory presented in court suggested that Cat West and Williams had an argument. In a fit of anger, Williams allegedly struck her with the bottle, causing a fatal injury. Panicked, he attempted to stage an accidental fall and cleaned up the blood in the house, but failed to dispose of all the evidence. Evidence supporting this theory included a fitness app on Williams's phone, which tracked his movements. The app showed that Williams was active in the house until midnight and again early in the morning before the police arrived. This contradicted his claim of being asleep, leading police to speculate that he was trying to conceal evidence during these times. A neighbor who discovered the body recalled seeing a male silhouette on the doorstep of the house in the early morning hours. However, due to the dim light, she couldn't be certain if it was Williams or someone else. She also couldn't determine if the person entered the house. This information piqued the investigators' interest, especially given Cat West's online persona, Kitty Cat, which had attracted many male admirers who paid to see her revealing photos. This theory suggests that a highly devoted fan may have been responsible. As a homemaker, Cat West often received messages from various men, including some with inappropriate proposals. However, she kept her distance, and there were no explicit threats or harassment found in their communications. A few persistent fans who lived in other states were quickly ruled out as suspects. Despite this, mysterious footprints were found on the doorstep, which didn't belong to the homeowners, but they vanished on the lawn, and their origin remained unknown. Friends, relatives, and neighbors described the Williams family as a happy couple, and he knew her online activities under the name Kitty Cat. While some might have seen it as unusual, he treated it as harmless fun. Their social circle was unaware of Cat West's online persona, just as most of her followers didn't know her real-life identity. Williams firmly denied ever abusing his wife, saying he loved her so much that harming her was impossible. However, they frequently argued, and a text exchange from January 12 revealed a heated dispute. Cat West criticized Williams for not matching her energy and temperament, suggesting they might be incompatible. Despite the lack of direct evidence, Williams remained the prime suspect. Following his arrest, his family and defense attorneys rallied to his defense, believing he was innocent. They insisted that he could never hurt his wife. After his arrest, Williams was unable to afford the $500,000 bail and had to stay in custody until his trial, which took almost 3 years. He was offered a plea deal, admitting guilt in exchange for a reduced sentence, but he refused, maintaining his innocence. The trial, which began in November 2020, drew significant media attention. This publicity put pressure on the judges and jurors. By this time, the possibility of a third party's involvement in Cat West's death was no longer considered. The prosecution argued that all the evidence indicated that Williams was responsible for his wife Cat West's death. They believed that, fueled by jealousy and intoxicated, he hit her with a bottle, causing fatal injuries. In an attempt to cover his tracks, they suggested he staged the scene to look like an accident and removed evidence from the house. In contrast, Williams's defense team claimed that Cat West's death was an accident. They pointed out that her extremely high blood alcohol levels would have impaired her balance and coordination. Cat West's mother testified in support of Williams, describing her daughter as eccentric but stressing that Williams loved her unconditionally and would never harm her. She also appealed to the court to consider the well-being of their child, Lola, who had already lost her mother and now risked losing her father. On January 11, 2021, the jury delivered a guilty verdict for involuntary manslaughter. As a result, Williams received the maximum sentence of 13 years in prison, taking into account the time he had already served. Notably, if he had accepted the initial plea deal offered to him, he may have already been a free man by now. Unfortunately, all of Williams's appeals, led by his lawyers, have been unsuccessful thus far. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Su Xingqi. Tam Xing Fai, a 43 years old faculty member, was noticeably absent from work, sparking concern among his colleagues. On July 4th, a coworker named Ma tried to reach him on his mobile phone at 11 a.m., but there was no answer. Ma wasn't immediately worried, assuming Tam Xing Fai was busy taking care of his family's adopted dog, which had a skin disease and was scheduled to visit the vet. However, when Xing Fai failed to show up for a meeting at the university's finance department on July 5th, Ma's concern grew. He tried calling Xing Fai's mobile phone again, but there was still no answer. Unfortunately, Ma didn't have Xing Fai's landline phone number, so he couldn't try contacting him that way. By July 6th, Xing Fai had been absent from work for 2 days with no communication with his colleagues. One of his co-workers finally reported the situation to the finance department, which prompted Xing Fai's superiors to call his landline phone. Unfortunately, no one answered that call either. The police contacted the library where Helen Tong Yanyi, the 33 years old wife of the missing man. Library staff reported that she was also absent from work without prior notice. They, originally from Zhongshan in Guangdong Province, China, had been married for 11 years and had 2 daughters, Hiu Man, 10, and Hiu Ing, 7 years old. Despite their difficult living conditions and financial struggles, the family was known to be kind, happy, and cheerful. They lived in an abandoned recycling station on Huazhu South Road, but Xing Fai often took his daughters on outings to have fun in town. Their children were well behaved, and the family seemed to be a happy one. Given their circumstances, it was possible that the family had decided to take a vacation together. However, something unexpected must have happened, preventing them from returning. Xing Fai's colleagues repeatedly tried to contact him by phone, hoping for a response. Eventually, someone answered, but to their surprise, it was a middle-aged man with an unfamiliar voice, not a member of the family. A man claiming to be Xing Fai's cousin called his workplace, stating that the family had taken a summer vacation to Guangdong Province in mainland China. He allegedly received Xing Fai's phone for safekeeping, but couldn't provide a return date for the family. However, the call only heightened suspicion among Xing Fai's co-workers. They found it out of character for Xing Fai to suddenly leave without notice, as he was a diligent and organized person. If he planned a vacation, he would have arranged it with his children's school in advance. Moreover, the family was responsible for 9 stray dogs, raising concerns about who would care for them. Xing Fai's family situation also raised questions. His father, a sailor, had gone missing, and his mother was living in a nursing home due to illness. Xing Fai regularly visited her every week, making it unlikely that he would abandon her to go on vacation. Eventually, the police were called. One of Xing Fai's colleagues accompanied them to his home, an abandoned recycling station in Pingqi village. During the trip, a suspicious person was spotted. A short man was seen from a distance near the Xing Fai family's fence before quickly disappearing. Initially, no attention was paid to this, and they continued on. Upon arrival, they found the gate to Xing Fai's home locked. The police investigated the property and interviewed the neighbors. The abandoned recycling station covered a large area of approximately 450 square meters, but most of it was empty space, about 350 square meters of flower beds. The construction area was only about 90 square meters, and the building was constructed illegally. The original owner had built several tin houses on the site, using it as a waste recycling facility. A stone house on the opposite side was used as a pig farm, with very few people living in the area. As a result, the police only had one neighbor to question, an elderly woman named Wang who lived alone across the street. Wang claimed to have known the family's schedule and reported that they usually tended to their garden in the afternoon. Su Wang had limited knowledge of the family's personal lives, mainly due to their remote location. She was aware that the family didn't receive many visitors, and the only relative she knew of was Xing Fai's cousin, Su Xingqi. Wang didn't have information about Su Xingqi's address or that of Xing Fai's uncle, who supposedly lived in a nearby stone house. When the police questioned Xing Fai's colleague, they learned that a cousin had answered Xing Fai's phone, leading the police to believe it was Su Xingqi. However, Wang clarified that she didn't know Su Xingqi's address. She did report hearing cries for help from the house on July 5. In response, the police conducted door-to-door inquiries in Pingqi village and eventually tracked down a man matching Wang's description at a stone house on Huazhu Road. The man, 42 years old Zhu Shenqi, confirmed that he was Xing Fai's cousin and stated that he occasionally visited the family home to help with renovations and gardening. When questioned about the phone call, Su Xingqi maintained that the family had gone on vacation to China. On July 5, Xing Fai visited his mother at the nursing home and then returned home to inform Su Xingqi that he planned to travel to Danyuan, China for a few days. Due to the high roaming fees, Xing Fai asked Su Xingqi to hold on to his Hong Kong mobile phone until he returned. The person seen fleeing the scene by police and Xing Fai's colleague was actually Su Xingqi, who was leaving after feeding the family dogs. Su Xingqi's behavior and expressions were observed, and he appeared to be telling the truth. His story seemed consistent, and there were no obvious discrepancies. When asked if he had a key to the family home, Su Xingqi denied it. Despite finding Su Xingqi, the police continued their investigation. Going door to door in the village. A local resident reported a stranger borrowed money from a villager, leading to a heated argument. The villager threatened to seek compensation from Xing Fai's family, who were struggling financially due to his mother's hospitalization and existing debts. The villagers initially believed the stranger was not Su Xingqi, but they suspected the family might be hiding to escape their debts. However, when the police inquired about Su Xingqi, the villagers revealed that he had been dishonest. They confirmed that Su Xingqi regularly visited the Xing Fai's home to perform maintenance and repairs, and he was always able to enter the house on his own, even when no one else was present. This information led the police to conclude that Su Xingqi must have had a key or access to the home Xing Fai's. In fact, he did have a key, which Xing Fai had given to him, as witnessed by Wang. When the police asked Su Xingqi for the key, he initially denied owning one, claiming he used a spare key for renovations that he had returned. However, his demeanor had changed, and he was avoiding key details. When the police threatened to search his home, Su Xingqi became agitated and suddenly remembered another house key that he had not returned. He retrieved the key from his dresser and handed it over to the police. Although Su Xingqi's behavior was suspicious, there was no direct evidence linking him to the family's disappearance. As a result, the police placed him under surveillance while continuing their investigation. During their investigation, police used a spare key to enter the home, where they found a scene of disarray and evidence of a ransacking. Fresh blood stains on the walls suggested that a violent incident had occurred on the property. The presence of a sink full of dirty dishes in the kitchen raised suspicions about the family's claim to have traveled to China, as it seemed unlikely they would have left their home in such a state before departing. A search of the master bedroom turned up the family's identification cards in a dresser, which prompted the lead investigator to contact the border crossing office. The office reported that the family had not left Hong Kong. Further investigation of the house uncovered a blood-stained shirt in a side room and a blood-stained plastic water pipe in the corner. Police then deployed sniffer dogs to search for additional evidence and potentially locate the missing family members. The dogs detected a scent and discovered blood stains under recently disturbed soil 9 meters away. Furthermore, despite it being summer vacation, their children, Housman and Housman, were enrolled in summer school, indicating that the family would not have been on vacation. It became clear that the family had been victims of a crime, so a special team was set up to investigate. Due to the late hour, the police cordoned off the scene, restricted access to Pingqi village. Su Xingqi was confined to home. He was the prime suspect in the case. Su Xingqi promptly confessed. According to Su Xingqi's statement, he was from Huanpu in Guangdong province and typically resided with his sister, wife, and two sons, aged 15 and 16, who suffered from memory issues. Su Xingqi previously earned a living selling motorcycles in Junction City. However, following Guangdong's ban on motorcycles in 2006, sales plummeted. Financial struggles led him to reach out to his cousin, Xing Fai, in Hong Kong, seeking employment opportunities. Xing Fai helped Su Xingqi secure a construction job that provided a daily salary of 500 Hong Kong dollars, including accommodation and meals. After working for half a month, Su Xingqi became dissatisfied with his salary, which was reduced to 220 Hong Kong dollars due to company deductions. He impulsively quit his job and returned to China. However, in 2007, a typhoon damaged his home, and he needed money for repairs. Su Xingqi asked Xing Fai to help him find work in Hong Kong again. When Xing Fai couldn't find him a job, he proposed an alternative arrangement. Xing Fai would pay Su Xingqi from his own salary to help with household chores and repairs at his home. Su Xingqi accepted this offer and began traveling to Hong Kong every other month to work on Xing Fai's home and garden. Su Xingqi claims that he and Tong Yanyi, Xing Fai's wife, began a clandestine romantic relationship. However, Xing Fai discovered their relationship on July 3rd. On July 5th, Su Xingqi accompanied Xing Fai to a nursing home to visit his mother. Su Xingqi snuck out of the nursing home to return home and continue his affair with Yanyi. Unexpectedly, Xing Fai returned home early and, in a fit of rage, physically confronted Su Xingqi. In a state of panic, the man grabbed a 25-centimeter-long fruit knife and stabbed Xing Fai until he fell to the ground, dead. Overwhelmed by what had just happened, he wanted to turn himself in to the police. However, Su Xingqi refused to let that happen. Since he couldn't change his mind, Su Xingqi decided to kill Xing Fai. Su Xingqi found some wires in the corner of the room, charged at him, knocked him to the ground, and tied his hands behind his back. Su Xingqi then covered Xing Fai's mouth and nose with tape and put a plastic bag over his head. Before this, their two children were in their bedroom watching cartoons. They heard the commotion and their parents warning to run away, but instead, they ran towards their parents and saw their father dead and Su Xingqi in the process of killing their mother. The children ran back to their room, crying, and locked the door. Since the parent was already tied up, Su Xingqi left to pursue the children. Su Xingqi picked up a pair of pliers, opened the door, and used more wires to restrain the children. He tied their hands behind their backs, covered their mouths and noses with tape, and put plastic bags over their heads. The children, Housman and Housman, also suffocated shortly after. After killing the whole family, Su Xingqi was at a loss of what to do next. He turned to his home to think it over. He thought that hiding them in a ditch or body of water would be too easy to find, and that dismembering them would be too exhausting and time-consuming. So he settled on burying them on their own property. On July 6th, he returned to the home to try and clean up as many blood stains as he could find. He then got to work on digging the hole. He dug a hole deep and wide enough to hold the family of 4 and quickly placed their bodies inside of it. He also disposed of the murder weapons in the pit before filling it back in. The police believed Su Xingqi's story, despite being skeptical about his motive, and took him to the location where he claimed the crime had taken place. He pointed out the spot where the sharp knife, water pipe, iron pliers, and other tools used in the crime were hidden. On July 7th, the police called in the fire department to assist in unearthing the remains. The firefighters arrived with excavation tools and gas masks, as the bodies were buried near a septic tank. However, they quickly encountered a problem when they hit a layer of cement while digging. It turned out that Su Xingqi had failed to mention in his confession that he had filled the pit with cement before covering it up. The firefighters were unable to break through the cement with their tools, and the police had to call in a private engineering company for assistance. The engineers arrived with high-grade tools and began drilling through the concrete slab. However, when they reached a point where they saw human hair, they became uneasy and refused to continue digging, not wanting to encounter a dead body. It took the police 13 hours to persuade them to resume the excavation. After excavating the pit, authorities found it to be 2.5 meters wide and 6 feet deep. The bodies of the 4 family members were discovered at the bottom, all barefoot and wearing only t-shirts and shorts. Xing Fai's body was at the very bottom. His hands and feet were bound with electric wire, and he had multiple stab wounds to his abdomen, back, and neck, with his clothes stained red with blood. The other family members were similarly bound with electric wire. Yanyi's mouth and nose were covered with tape, her hands and feet were bound, and her face was distorted. 2 family members, Hiu Man and Hiu Ing, showed no obvious signs of trauma, leading police to suspect they may have been buried alive. Su Xingqi was formally arrested and interrogated. During the interrogation, he altered his confession. He admitted that he lied about the affair. Shan Hui kicked Su Xingqi out of the house and banned him from returning. Despite this, Su Xingqi came back to apologize and was surprisingly forgiven by Xing Fai. Su Xingqi returned to the house on July 3rd to start working, and it seemed that his relationship with Xing Fai had been repaired. However, on July 4th, Su Xingqi attempted to molest a family member. Su Xingqi fled the house in a rage, not wanting to alert the neighbors. The next day, Su Xingqi tried to force his way into the house again, claiming he wanted to apologize. However, Xing Fai had anticipated this and returned home early. They got into an argument, which escalated into Su Xingqi stabbing Xing Fai. Su Xingqi's later confession matched his initial one, but with the additional detail of filling a makeshift grave with cement. However, after the bodies were taken away for autopsy, it was discovered that Su Xingqi's account of the events was inaccurate. The autopsy revealed that Xing Fai's murder was more brutal than initially described. Xing Fai had sustained 9 stab wounds to the head and neck, nearly 80 stab wounds to the body, and 10 stab wounds to the hands and feet. Contrary to Su Xingqi's claim, Xing Fai was strangled, not suffocated with a plastic bag. Hiu Ying's cause of death was the only accurate part of Su Xingqi's account. Forensic analysis of the home found at the cutlery and dishes did not have the family's DNA on them, but they did have Su Xingqi's DNA. This suggested that Xing Fai was not killed in the kitchen, but rather elsewhere in the house. The investigation also revealed that the murder was premeditated, as the cement used to bury the bodies had been purchased by Su Xingqi prior to the murder. Furthermore, the weapon used was not a kitchen knife from the family, but rather one belonging to Su Xingqi. Additional investigations by the police found that the family's bank cards had been used at an ATM after the time of death, but no money could be withdrawn due to repeated failed PIN number guesses. The cash and bank cards belonging to the family were also missing. Su Xingqi's motive for the crime was robbery, and it was premeditated. Whenever the police pointed out inconsistencies in his story, he would suddenly come up with a new explanation. According to Su Xingqi, his family's ancestral home in China needed urgent repairs, and his 2 children required 100,000 in cash to cover their school fees. He was not well liked in his local community, so he knew it would be difficult to borrow money from his neighbors. He turned to Xing Fai for help because his business trips to Hong Kong had not generated enough income. Su Xingqi suspected that Su Xingqi was wealthier than he seemed and that he is very stingy. The reason for his low salary during his time working for Xing Fai was that they were exploiting him for low-cost labor. On July 3rd, Su Xingqi traveled to Hong Kong without informing anyone and waited until July 5th, when they had a day off from work. When Xing Fai returned home and found Su Xingqi there, he asked if he needed to cook something, and they men went to the kitchen together. Su Xingqi asked to borrow 1 million Hong Kong dollars, but Xing Fai rejected the request. He explained that he had to use the money for his mother's medical treatment and his daughter's education. However, Su Xingqi didn't believe him and accused Xing Fai of only using him for cost labor. Xing Fai became angry and ordered Su Xingqi to leave. As Xing Fai turned his back, with a concealed knife on, Xingqi attacked him from behind, covering his mouth and stabbing him. Su Xingqi then restrained in Hiu Ying and Hiu Man and began searching the house for cash and bank cards. He demanded to know the password for the bank cards, and Xing Fai intentionally gave him a fake password. Su Xingqi didn't realize this at the time. Su Xingqi claimed that he had killed others by covering their mouths and noses with tape and putting a plastic bag over their head. However, when he went to the nearest ATM to withdraw cash, he discovered that the PIN number he had been given didn't work, and realized that Xing Fai had lied to him. Upon returning home, Su Xingqi discovered that everyone had suffocated to death in his absence. He found the food he and the others had been preparing and decided to eat it next to the 4 corpses while contemplating how to dispose of the bodies. After stealing $6,000 in Hong Kong dollars from Xing Fai's body, Su Xingqi buried the corpses and tools in a small pit, then went to sleep at Xing Fai home. The next morning, Su Xingqi realized that the smell from the bodies might lead to their discovery, so he bought cement and returned to the home. He dug up the pit, poured in the cement, and refilled the hole. Su Xingqi then stayed at the home to answer any calls to Xing Fai's cell phone or house phone, telling callers that he was taking care of things while the Xing Fai family is on vacation. However, Su Xingqi did not expect his ruse to be uncovered so quickly. Even later, he continued to lie about many details, including when he bought the cement and the cause of Yan Yi's death. At this stage, the police didn't think they needed to continue obtaining an accurate confession. In their opinion, they had collected enough evidence to proceed. The trial took place at the Hong Kong High Court on October 28, 2010. Su Xingqi initially pleaded not guilty and altered his previous statement. He claimed that his original story about the affair was true and that Xing Fai was killed in self-defense, while Hiu Man and Hiu Ying were killed accidentally. The defendant stated that he had falsely confessed to extortion and murder brutality, which included physical abuse and suffocation. On November 23, the jury delivered a unanimous guilty verdict for the murders of Xing Fai and Yan Yi. However, the defendant was acquitted of murdering Hiu Ying. Despite this, the defendant received a life sentence for the 3 counts of murder and 1 count of manslaughter. The presiding judge criticized the defendant, describing him as lacking a conscience and being unrepentant. The judge also accused the defendant of fabricating the self-defense story and affair to tarnish the victims' reputations. After Xing Fai's family death, who lived in Hong Kong, surprisingly defended him. They accused Xing Fai of being a hypocrite and the real villain. According to them, Xing Fai was exploiting Su Xingqi for cheap labor and taking his money. However, the neighbors and residents of Ping Chi village were outraged by these claims, forcing Su Xingqi's family to move back to China to avoid the backlash. The crime was considered one of the most shocking in Hong Kong's history. The community showed an outpouring of support for the family Xing Fai's, with many visiting their home to offer condolences. Netizens also raised more than enough money to cover the funeral expenses. Additionally, the family's 9 stray dogs were adopted by another family. Every year on July 5th, the adoptive family would take the dogs for a walk in Pingqi village, near the home of their former owners. On August 9, 2022, 55-year-old Su Xingqi passed away in Hong Kong's Stanley Prison due to liver cancer. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jirish. On November 30, 2003, Shuba, a 27-year-old law student, became engaged to Jirish, a software engineer. Her father, a respected lawyer in Bengaluru, had a stellar reputation in the legal community. As his daughter grew older, he worried about her marital prospects. Consequently, he arranged her marriage to Jirish, a suitable match with a good job at a prominent multinational company. The two families had known each other for years, which further solidified the union. Confident that Jirish would provide a secure future for his daughter, Shuba's father gave his blessing for the engagement, set to take place on November 30, 2003, with a wedding planned for April 2004. However, 3 days after the engagement, on December 3, 2003, Shuba suggested they celebrate with dinner at a restaurant that evening. Jirish was thrilled, as this was the first time his fiancée had taken the initiative to plan a night out. Before dinner, Jirish took Shuba to his office to introduce her to his colleagues. Afterwards, they headed to a restaurant on Old Airport Road for dinner. After the meal, around 9:30 p.m., Jirish and Shuba began their journey home. But on the way, Shuba asked Jirish to stop near the airport's landing strip so they could watch the planes take off and land. Jirish agreed, parking his scooter to the side, and they stood together, enjoying the planes and each other's company. Suddenly, 3 boys on motorcycles appeared, attacking Jirish. Shuba was left alone to face the 3 armed boys, and she desperately shouted for help. Unfortunately, they were alone at that moment, and the 3 boys brutally beat Jirish before fleeing. Shuba persisted in shouting for help, and her cries were fortunately heard by a passing car driver who stopped to assist her and Jirish. With great effort, both the car owner and Shuba managed to get Jirish into their vehicle and drive him to a nearby hospital. The doctor admitted Jirish and immediately began his treatment. Meanwhile, Shuba notified both her and Jirish's families about the accident, and within a short time, both families arrived at the hospital. Despite the doctor's best efforts throughout the night, they were ultimately unable to save Jirish, and on December 4th, they pronounced him deceased. Since this was a clear-cut case of murder, Jirish's father rushed to the nearby police station that same day. He recounted to the police how his son and his fiancée had gone out for dinner the previous night, and how, while they were standing at a landing spot near the airport, Jirish was attacked, ultimately leading to his death. The police promptly took over the case and began their investigation by questioning Shuba, the sole eyewitness to Jirish's murder. Given her distress, she had been inconsolable since learning of Jirish's death. The police approached her gently. However, Shuba's account matched the one Jirish's father had already provided, prompting the police to launch a thorough probe of both the crime scene and Jirish's background. They even explored the possibility that Jirish had personal enemies, but their efforts yielded no concrete leads to crack the case. According to reports, the police were unable to find any CCTV footage in the area, which was largely deserted and lacked residential cameras at the time. Consequently, the investigators turned to Jirish and Shuba's engagement video as a potential source of leads. Their motive was to investigate whether someone close to Jirish might have been involved in his murder, given that only their families were aware of the couple's trip. The investigative officer meticulously examined the engagement video, focusing on the behavior of their families and relatives. However, no suspicious behavior was detected among them. Undeterred, the officer re-watched the video, this time concentrating on Girish and Shuba's neighbors and other guests in attendance. Unfortunately, this effort also yielded no positive results. In the midst of the investigation, the officer took note of Shuba's facial expressions. Unlike what one would expect, she didn't seem happy and was making an effort to keep her distance from Girish. Initially, the officer had focused on the behavior and expressions of Girish and Shuba's relatives, almost neglecting Shuba herself. But after seeing Shuba's unhappy expressions and attempts to distance herself from Girish in a brief clip, he decided to review the entire engagement video again. Upon re-examining the video, the officer observed that during the ring ceremony, Shuba looked visibly sad while sitting with Girish and was consistently trying to create space between them. This struck the investigating officer as unusual, as newly engaged couples are typically ecstatic. Shuba's evident unhappiness raised his suspicions, but he also recognized that relying solely on a video wasn't enough to take action against her. Therefore, he decided to investigate Shuba's call records. Although it was unusual for the police to use this technology in 2003, as it was still relatively new in India at the time, the officer's interest in technology led him to pursue this avenue. In fact, mobile phones were a rarity in India back then, but Shuba's wealthy family had made it possible for her to own one. Upon obtaining her call records, it was revealed that on December 3rd, Shuba had made repeated calls to a single number. The police then traced the number back to a boy named Aaron Verma. The police then delved deeper to uncover who Aaron Verma was and what his connection to Shuba was. They soon discovered that both Aaron and Shuba attended the same college, with Shuba being 2 years his senior. This new information prompted the officer to track their locations on December 3rd. Shuba's location was found near the airport, as she was with Girish. However, when tracing Aaron's location, the police found that he was also near the airport, following Shuba to every location she visited. This heightened the police's suspicion, and they subsequently tracked down Aaron Verma and summoned him to the police station for questioning. When the police questioned Aaron about his whereabouts on December 3rd, he claimed to have been out of town for work. The instant he made this statement, the investigative officer was convinced that Aaron was lying and would never admit the truth if asked directly. So they released him, but secretly tapped his phone beforehand. The officer suspected that Aaron and Shuba might be involved in Girish's death. However, they couldn't present them as guilty in court based solely on their alibis and call records from that day. Therefore, they put Aaron's phone under surveillance, believing that if he was involved in the murder, he would eventually incriminate himself. Upon returning home from the police station, Aaron's first call was to Shuba. Over the phone, Aaron informed Shuba that the police had questioned him about Girish's death. Shuba asked if he had disclosed anything to the police. Aaron reassured her that he had kept quiet and successfully misled the police, telling them he was out of town on December 3rd. When the police heard the recording, their suspicions were fully corroborated, leading to the immediate arrest of Aaron and Shuba. At the station, the police presented them with the call recording, call detail records, and location history. Initially, both attempted to deceive the police, but eventually, Aaron's nerve failed, and he confessed to the police that they had indeed murdered Girish. The unfolding story stunned everyone. The 19-year-old Aaron and 27-year-old Shuba had been secretly involved for the past 2 years. It was astonishing to learn that Aaron, still in his teenage years, was deeply in love with a woman 7 years his senior. Reports suggest that Shuba also desired to marry Aaron, but their dream remained unrealized. Shuba's father discovered their secret relationship and disapproved of Aaron, who was significantly younger than Shuba. As a result, he hastily arranged Shuba's engagement to Girish, which took place on November 30th. However, Shuba was unhappy with this arrangement. Despite Girish being educated and financially stable, Shuba found his simplicity and modest lifestyle unappealing and felt he wasn't a suitable match for her. During the investigation, it emerged that Shuba had confided in her beautician at the time of her engagement, revealing her intention to either flee before the wedding or harm Girish. Coerced into the engagement by her father, Shuba had now devised a plan with Aaron to eliminate Girish. This explained her repeated calls to Aaron, who agreed to carry out her plan. With the help of his cousin Dinesh, Aaron hired a local thug named Vinette. Shuba planned to lure Girish out of the house on December 3rd, pretending to take him out for dinner. On their way back, she would take him to a secluded spot near the airport's landing strip, where it would be easy to carry out the murder. According to this plan, on December 3rd, after dinner, Shuba expressed her desire to watch airplanes take off. He agreed to his fiancée's request, and they proceeded to the landing spot. Throughout their journey, Shuba kept Aaron informed about her location through regular calls and messages. Shortly after, Aaron, Dinesh, and Venkatesa arrived at the flight landing spot. Dinesh and Venkatesa then launched a brutal attack on Girish, striking him on the head with an iron rod. Girish collapsed instantly, bleeding profusely from his head injury and losing consciousness. Once the four were convinced that Girish was on the brink of death, Aaron and his companions fled the scene, abandoning the iron rod in the nearby bushes. After a significant period following Girish's injury, Shuba sought help, and the rest of the story unfolded. Despite this, Girish's killers managed to evade the police for nearly 50 days until Shuba and her accomplices were arrested on January 25, 2004, when the motive behind Girish's murder and the identities of his killers were finally revealed. The news of the incident spread rapidly throughout the state media. The police gathered all the evidence, interviewed witnesses, and prepared their case file, which was then presented in court. Although the case languished in the regular court for a lengthy period, it was eventually transferred to a fast-track court. Even in the fast-track court, the trial continued from 2007 to 2010. In May 2010, the fast-track court sentenced Shuba, Aaron, and their companions to life imprisonment. However, in July 2010, Shuba filed a bail application with the Karnataka High Court, which upheld the lower court's decision and rejected her bail plea. With no other option, Shuba then filed her bail application with the Supreme Court in August 2014, and the Supreme Court granted her bail for a limited period. The investigative officer who cracked this murder case by reviewing a video recording of the incident deserves appreciation. However, if Shuba had mustered the courage to confide in her father that she didn't like Girish and wouldn't be happy with him in her life, perhaps Girish would be alive today. Even if Shuba had shared her concerns with Girish, maybe he could have persuaded her father. The tragic irony of this story is that by the time Girish's killers were sentenced to life imprisonment, Girish's father had already passed away, leaving no one to find closure. With that, the Girish murder case finally comes to a close. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kirti Vyas. Kirti Vyas, a 28-year-old resident of Mumbai, lived with her family in a Bharatnagar residence on Grand Road. After completing her education, she worked in the finance department at a famous beauty salon in Andheri West, Mumbai. On March 16, 2018, Kirti followed her daily routine, leaving her house at 7 a.m. to head to the office. Her two friends were already waiting for her in their car, and together they drove to work. However, Kirti failed to return home that evening, and her family was unable to contact her as her phone was switched off. Concerned, they reported her disappearance to the police. Despite an extensive 50-day search, there was no trace of Kirti. It wasn't until the police conducted a thorough investigation that they found a crucial clue, a drop of blood, which ultimately led them to uncover the truth behind her disappearance. Kirti's family members were busy with their tasks when, around 11:30 a.m., her mother tried to contact her to ask for the Wi-Fi password at home. However, she couldn't reach Kirti because both of her mobile phones were switched off. Assuming Kirti was busy at work, her mother thought she had turned off her phones and focused on her own tasks. Later that evening, Kirti's family grew worried when she didn't come home on time. They called her office and were surprised to learn that Kirti hadn't come to work that day and her phone was consistently switched off. Distressed, they contacted Kirti's close friends, who said they had last spoken to her the previous night. The family then began searching for Kirti in the vicinity, but despite their efforts, her whereabouts remained unknown. The entire night passes, but Kirti fails to return home. The following day, overcome with exhaustion and defeat, Kirti's family files a report of her disappearance at the DB Road police station. After registering the case, the police investigation team visits Kirti's office to gather information about her. They also question her friends. During the interrogation, two of Kirti's friends, Tamna and Kushi Sahajwani, informed the police that they dropped Kirti at Grand Road Station on the day she went missing, as per her request, while they were driving her to the office. To verify their statements, the police examined the CCTV footage outside Kirti's house. The footage clearly shows Kirti leaving her house around 9 a.m. on the morning of March 16, 2018. Tamna and Kushi Sahani were already waiting with their car, and Kirti gets in. They then drive away. Since this was the last time Kirti was seen with her friends, the police asked Tamna and Kushi Sahani to join the investigation team and provide any information they have about Kirti, no matter how small, and details about the events of March 16, 2018. The 28-year-old finance manager, Kirti, has disappeared, and the Mumbai police have yet to uncover any clues about her whereabouts. She was last spotted outside her building, getting into an SUV owned by her colleague. According to her colleague, he dropped her off at Lamington Road. As Kirti was last seen with Siddesh and Kushi, the police initially suspected their involvement in her disappearance. Both have been cooperative with the authorities, assisting in the investigation. Despite days of scrutiny, the police have found no evidence to implicate them. In fact, Siddesh and Kushi have even launched social media campaigns on Facebook and Twitter to help locate Kirti. As a result, the police have cleared them of any suspicion. However, the police are still faced with a daunting task of finding Kirti, whose disappearance remains a mystery. The crime branch had already verified CCTV footage outside Kirti's home, which confirmed that Siddesh and Kushi gave Kirti a lift in their car heading towards the office. However, they claimed to have dropped Kirti near Grand Road Station, but the CCTV footage around that area had not been checked earlier. The crime branch then immediately began scrutinizing the CCTV footage around the station. Additionally, they investigated the CCTV footage from Siddesh Tamana and Kushi Sahajwani's car. A surprising revelation emerged. Neither Kushi, Siddesh, nor Kirti appeared in any CCTV footage around or at the station. Moreover, the CCTV in Siddesh Tamana's car did not confirm that they went towards the station on March 16, 2018. When questioned by the crime branch, Siddesh and Kushi initially claimed to have dropped Kirti at Grand Road Station, but the CCTV evidence contradicted their statement. Later, they changed their story, saying that Kirti had initially asked to be dropped at the station, but then requested to get down near Navjivan Society, which is why they did not reach the station. The prime suspects had repeatedly changed their statements, arousing the policeman's suspicion. As a result, they kept a close eye on both of them. In addition to this, their phone records were checked, but nothing suspicious was found. Consequently, both individuals remained at large for nearly 50 days. Despite Kirti's disappearance without a trace, it seemed as though there would be no leads on their whereabouts. However, the police received a forensic report that completely altered the course of the case. It was discovered that when Kushi, Siddesh, and Kirti were last seen leaving the office on March 16, 2018, the police had immediately sent the car they used for forensic examination. The forensic lab's report revealed that a drop of blood was found in the car's trunk. After subjecting this drop of blood to a DNA test and matching it with a sample from Kirti's parents, it was confirmed that the blood found in the car belonged to Kirti. The presence of Kirti's blood in the car was now revealing a lot. After this revelation, the police take Siddesh Tamanar and Kushi Sahajwani into custody again and begin a rigorous interrogation. Both of them initially claim that they dropped Kirti off on the way and do not know her whereabouts. However, when the police confront them about a drop of Kirti's blood found in the car's trunk, they are unable to provide a clear explanation. Under intense questioning, they eventually crack and start revealing the truth. The truth is shocking. It emerges that KY worked as a finance manager at B. Blunt Salon, while Kushi Sahajwani was Kirti's junior, and Siddesh Tamanar worked as an account executive. Siddesh Tamanar had been employed at the salon for a long time, with decent performance, but had been failing to meet his targets for the past few months, accompanied by continuous errors in his work. As a result, Kirti issues a notice to Siddesh Tamanar, warning him to either improve his performance by March 16, 2018, or face termination. In this notice, Siddesh Tamanar, 28, informs his colleague, 42-year-old Kushi Sahajwani, who works with him. Unbeknownst to others, a romantic relationship had developed between Kushi and Siddesh at the office, despite Kushi being already married. When Kirti issued the notice to Siddesh, Kushi became fearful that she would also lose her job, since Siddesh had failed to improve his performance in March. In response, Kushi and Siddesh concoct a sinister plan. They call Kirti and ask her to meet them at the office, and instead of taking the train, Kirti gets into their EOS sports car. En route, they demand that Kirti not terminate Siddesh's employment. But Kirti responds that the decision would be made at the office meeting. When they don't get their way, the two start physically fighting with Kirti inside the car. During the struggle, Siddesh and Kushi use a scarf to strangle Kirti, keeping her restrained for an extended period, ultimately resulting in her death inside the car. After Kirti's death, the two concoct a plan to discreetly dispose of the body, making it seem like nothing is amiss. They install a sunroof in the car, placing Kirti's body inside, and then head to the office. Upon their return, they drive the car to a secluded area, where they dismember Kirti's body into 3 pieces, all within the vehicle. They subsequently dispose of the pieces in different locations. After securing the evidence, they visit a nearby car wash to thoroughly clean their vehicle, inside and out. From there, they proceed to Kirti's house, where they join forces with her family to stage a search effort, thereby avoiding suspicion. Siddesh and Kushi even launch an online campaign to find Kirti and personally visit the police, ensuring that no doubts are raised. Despite their confidence in evading detection, their luck takes a dramatic turn when the car cleaner's negligence leaves behind a trace of Kirti's blood in the trunk, ultimately exposing the entire incident. Following the full disclosure, Siddesh Tamanar and Kushi Sahajwani are charged with severe offenses, including kidnapping, misleading the police, destroying evidence, and murder. They are subsequently arrested and imprisoned. Currently, regarding the status of this case, Kushi Sahajwani has been released on bail, while Siddesh Tamanar remains behind bars. The police have yet to recover Kirti's remains. As the Mumbai Crime Branch continues to search for the body of 28-year-old Kirti Vas, who was murdered on March 16th, they suspect that the body might have been dumped in the area. The search operation is ongoing. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Agustina Imvinkelried. Agustina was born on June 6, 2001, in Esperanza. Agustina lived with her large family, and as the youngest of 5 children, received special treatment. People described Agustina as friendly, kind, and always smiling. Like many young people, she enjoyed going to the movies, bowling, discos, and playing the ukulele with her friends. Esperanza is a small town of around 40,000 residents, where everyone tends to know each other. The limited entertainment options led to the town's young people frequently running into and knowing one another. On the afternoon of January 12, 2019, Agustina's father dropped her off at a friend's house, where a group of 6 planned to gather. The girls had arranged to visit a nightclub and bowling center called Teos together. Agustina told her father she would spend the night at a friend's house. After leaving the club, Agustina sent a message to her boyfriend, Nahuel, asking him to join her, but he declined, saying he was tired. At the club, Agustina and her friends were having a blast, dancing and enjoying the music. By 5 a.m., they decided it was time to head out, but Agustina ran into another group of friends and decided to stick around for a bit longer. A surveillance camera captured her leaving the venue at 5:40 a.m., carrying her cell phone. After leaving the club, Agustina stopped by a fast food stand, waited in line, chatted with an acquaintance, and then headed towards the road. Normally, Agustina's parents knew her whereabouts because she always kept them informed. However, when morning arrived and they didn't receive a text from her saying she had made it to her friend's house safely, they grew concerned and tried to reach her. But her phone was unavailable. Her friend told the worried parents that Agustina hadn't returned from the club. Agustina's parents then contacted all her acquaintances, but no one knew where she might be. As a result, Agustina's father called the police and began searching for his daughter on his own. Daniel Rinklevery, a well-known local figure and president of the town's soccer club, was also the owner of a small furniture manufacturing and sales company. When news broke that he was in distress, many townspeople volunteered to help with the search for his missing niece, Agustina. Agustina's friends turned to social media to spread the word about her disappearance, which eventually caught the attention of television news programs. As a result, the police launched an investigation, focusing on Teos Club, the last place Agustina was seen. They interviewed potential witnesses and reviewed surveillance footage, which showed Agustina walking towards the road, but didn't provide any further leads. The police then broadened their search, questioning residents living along the road and staff from nearby businesses. They hoped someone might have seen or heard something, no matter how insignificant, that could serve as a clue to Agustina's whereabouts. Brian, a friend of Agustina's, heard about her disappearance on social media. He saw the many posts about finding her and got in touch with her father, Daniel. Brian told Daniel that he had seen Agustina outside Teos Club at around 6 a.m. He was driving by and noticed her standing on the side of the road, talking to the driver of a silver car that had pulled over next to her. This was a few hundred meters from the club. Brian drove on, but quickly pulled out his phone and called Agustina to check on her. He asked if she was okay and if she needed a ride home. Agustina told him she was fine, and that the man driving the silver car had stopped to warn her that the road wasn't safe to walk on because of the risk of being hit by traffic. She accepted Brian's offer of a ride, saying she was on her way to a friend's house. Brian then turned his car around and headed back towards Teos Club. When he arrived, Agustina was no longer there, and neither was the silver car. Assuming she had gone with the driver, Brian continued to try calling her, but she did not answer. Concerned, he drove to the friend's house she had mentioned, but there was no sign of her. He continued to check his phone for updates, hoping to hear from her or see her posting on social media. After learning about Agustina's disappearance and the discovery of her body, Brian shared crucial information with the police, providing a potential lead on the silver car and its driver. This testimony added vital details to the timeline, helping investigators reconstruct Agustina's final moments. Brian had stopped at a nearby gas station, about a few hundred meters from where he last saw Agustina, to wait for her and fill up his car. When Agustina failed to show up 15 minutes later, Brian went to look for her, but couldn't find her. His attempts to contact her were also unsuccessful, as she didn't answer. At the time, he didn't think much of it, assuming Agustina had gone directly to her friend's house and forgotten about their meeting. The primary clue in the investigation was the silver car. Although Brian couldn't identify the exact brand and model, He recalled it was an older vehicle. The driver might have been the last person to see Agostina, and it was possible that he was linked to her disappearance. When the police attempted to track Agostina's cell phone, they found that the last signal it transmitted was received by a tower located in the same neighborhood as Teo's club. Since the club was situated on the outskirts of town, surrounded by numerous vacant lots and fields, the search teams focused their search efforts in these areas. Of all the organizations along the road Agostina was walking on, only this particular gas station had installed surveillance cameras. Daniel suspected that Agostina might have passed by the gas station, given its proximity to her friend's house, and so he went there to review the footage and see if it had captured his daughter. The gas station attendant, a fellow father, sympathized with Daniel's concern and showed him the recording from that morning, which almost resulted in the attendant losing his job, as it was against the rules to share the footage with unauthorized individuals. The gas station owner was furious when he found out and fired the attendant on the spot. However, when the townspeople heard what had happened, they boycotted the gas station, taking their business elsewhere. This backlash forced the gas station owner to reconsider, and he eventually rehired the attendant, apologizing to him publicly in front of Esperanza. Daniel reviewed the gas station's camera footage, but didn't find his daughter on it. It seemed Agostina never made it there. However, the footage did show the same old silver Renault car Brian had described earlier. It drove past the gas station around the time Agostina was walking along the road. Daniel identified the car's owner as 39-year-old Pablo Trionfini, a municipal garbage collector who lived less than a kilometer away. Although he had no prior criminal record, Trionfini had caught the police's attention before. In 2017, his ex-wife reported him for domestic abuse, which led to a court order prohibiting him from contacting her. He was arrested again that year for violating that order. Not long after Daniel viewed the gas station's security footage, police officers arrived, unaware that Agostina's father had already seen it. They viewed the surveillance video and recognized the silver car. However, when they discovered that Daniel had seen the video before them, they feared a lynching might occur and rushed to Pablo Trionfini's house. Upon arrival, they found a crowd gathered in front of the house, shouting, "Where is Agostina?" The crowd dispersed when the police arrived, and one of the onlookers told the officers that Trionfini was inside. He had peeked out after hearing the shouting but fled back into the house and bolted the door when he saw the hostile crowd. Lacking probable cause for an unauthorized entry, the officers requested a search warrant. While waiting, they cordoned off the house to prevent Trionfini's escape. Around midnight, an officer decided to investigate the yard and found Pablo Trionfini deceased. The police rushed to help, but it was too late. Trionfini's death implicated him in Agostina's disappearance, but a search of his house and car yielded no evidence. By taking his own life, Trionfini had avoided further trouble and consequences. As the police were searching the house, Trionfini's neighbor approached them and said that Pablo had dropped by during the day and asked to borrow a shovel, allegedly to dig for some earthworms because he was going fishing. A half hour later, he returned the shovel and said something that struck the neighbor as very odd. Witnesses saw Trionfini leave the house several times on Sunday, riding his bicycle while holding a shovel. This possibly meant that Agostina was no longer among the living. On Monday, January 14, 2019, a search began at daybreak with the aid of drones and police dogs. At 9:15 a.m., Agostina's half-stripped body was discovered approximately 500 meters away from Teo's club. It had been concealed in a ditch covered with dense vegetation. The forensic examination showed that Agostina had fought desperately for her life. Her hands had defensive wounds, and pieces of her attacker's skin were found under her fingernails. DNA analysis verified that the man who assaulted Agostina was Pablo Trionfini. Forensics ruled the cause of death as strangulation. The exact circumstances of how Agostina ended up in Pablo Trionfini's car remain a mystery. Did he force her in, or did he simply offer her a lift? We will never know for certain, as the only two people who could provide answers are now deceased and unable to speak. A thorough search of Trionfini's phone revealed no evidence to suggest that he had any prior connection to Augustina. Hundreds of mourners attended Augustina Invincariat's funeral to pay their respects, whereas, surprisingly, not even Pablo Trionfini's family members showed up to his own funeral, according to reports by Argentine media outlets. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Marilyn Levesque. In the year 2020, the body of 22-year-old Marilyn Levesque was discovered with multiple stab wounds, sparking a massive public outcry. The community was outraged, demanding that Canadian authorities provide an explanation for how such a heinous crime could have occurred. Marilyn was born in 1997 in Chicoutimi, Quebec, to Corinne Levesque and François Goulet, who separated soon after her birth. Those close to her described her as kind, outgoing, and always friendly. Marilyn grew up partly with her mother and partly in foster homes. She left her hometown for Quebec City at the age of 17 and returned after a breakup with her boyfriend. From then on, she commuted between the two cities, working in Quebec City 2 or 3 days a week and taking the bus or carpool services since she didn't have a driver's license. By early 2020, Marilyn was living with her new boyfriend, Gabriel Truchon, in the Chicoutimi district, about 130 miles from Quebec City. Gabriel said Marilyn dreamed of a stable life and wanted to pursue a career in architecture. Tragically, on January 22, 2020, everything changed. Marilyn was in Quebec City for work, while Gabriel stayed in Chicoutimi. At around 9 p.m., Gabriel became worried when he couldn't reach Marilyn after several attempts to contact her. He then texted her co-workers, hoping someone had seen her. Soon, Gabriel received a call from an unknown number. The caller, identifying himself as a police officer, told Gabriel that Marilyn had been found dead. Forensic experts later determined that she died from multiple stab wounds, with more than 50 wounds on her body. To continue with Marilyn's story, let's go back 17 years. In 2003, Chantal Dechaine, a 32-year-old bartender at a Quebec hotel, met Eustachio Gallès, her 36-year-old boss, who oversaw the hotel's guest meals. Soon after, Chantal and Eustachio started a passionate romance. At the time, Chantal was a single mother of 2 girls, aged 10 and 6, whose father she had not lived with for several years. Eustachio, on the other hand, had been married to Joanne Lafront since 1996 and had 3 children with her. Their relationship was tumultuous, marked by instances of physical violence. For instance, Eustachio would occasionally smash walls in their home during fits of anger. On one occasion, while traveling through Ottawa, he assaulted his wife and was arrested, spending 7 days in jail. Despite these incidents and other forms of verbal abuse, Joanne Lafront claimed she wasn't afraid of her husband, describing him as a good father to their children, although his demanding job often kept him from spending time with the family. When Eustachio began his romance with Chantal, he left his wife Joanne and their 3 children to move in with his new love. The whirlwind relationship was soon formalized, and Chantal and Eustachio got married. At first, everything seemed perfect for the couple, as is often the case. Eustachio got along great with Chantal's kids, and they spent their weekends together, going to the movies, skating, and enjoying other activities. However, the relationship began to unravel as quickly as it had started. Meanwhile, Eustachio was working over 60 hours a week as the food and beverage manager at the hotel. He warned his supervisors he would quit on December 31, 2004, due to the unbearable job pressures, but he didn't confide in his employer about his personal struggles. Eustachio Gallès and Chantal Dechaine had a highly complex and often volatile relationship. According to recent accounts from witnesses, Gallès was intensely jealous, while others claimed that both partners were possessive and frequently argued about it. Friends close to the couple revealed that Gallès would sometimes shout, but never physically harmed Chen, who would often retaliate by insulting or even slapping him. The tension in the relationship climaxed on October 21, 2004. That morning, Eustachio and Chantal returned home after a night shift at the hotel. Chantal's 2 daughters were still asleep, having spent the evening with Angie Housman, their babysitter, who slept over at their house because their mother worked the night shift. From the couple's conversation, Angie learned of the night's argument between them. The babysitter left the house around 7:15 a.m., and the children were supposed to go to school around 8 a.m. Before leaving for school, the girls went in to greet their mother, who was in the bedroom with Eustachio. It was the last time they saw their mother alive. At 1:29 p.m., Eustachio Gales went to his ex-wife Joanna LaFrance's home to drop off his cash savings. While there, he called the police and confessed to killing his wife, Chantal. 10 minutes later, at 1:39 p.m., the police arrived at Joanna's home, where Gales repeated his confession and surrendered. Gales urged the police to hurry to the school before Chantal's 2 daughters returned home and discovered their mother's body. Meanwhile, the police went to Chantal's home, where they found her bloody body on the bed in her bedroom. Next to the body, they found 2 blood-stained knives and a broken hammer. An autopsy revealed that Chantal died from multiple hammer blows and stab wounds. The hammer blows were so brutal that the handle broke. In 2006, a jury found Gales guilty of second-degree murder during his trial. He admitted that he killed Chantal because she had decided to leave him. Gales was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. Gales had a history of violent behavior towards his partners. In 1997, he was jailed for 7 days for assaulting his first wife, Joanne LaFrance. Tragically, he went on to kill his second wife, Chantal Dechaine, in 2004. This pattern of behavior suggests that Gales had a tendency to abuse women. Despite this disturbing history, the parole board to release him in March 2019, concluding that his risk of reoffending was low. As a condition of his parole, Gales was permitted to date women to meet his sexual needs, but with strict limitations. His parole officer set rules for his interactions with women, allowing him to visit an erotic massage parlor once a month, but prohibiting romantic relationships. Additionally, he was required to observe a curfew between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. unless attending an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. However, Gales struggled to abide by these rules, frequently visiting the massage parlor several times a week instead of just once a month. In March 2019, Gales was released. Later, in June, the 51-year-old visited an erotic massage parlor where he met 22-year-old Marilyn Levesque, an employee. Although Marilyn's family knew she earned a living by providing intimate services, she rarely discussed it with them, and when she did, it was often in a light-hearted or joking manner. Those close to her described her as sensitive. However, she had become rigid about her job, and her relatives believed part of her wanted to change her life and quit. Yet, it's not easy to revert to minimum wage after becoming accustomed to earning the equivalent of 2 weeks' work in just 2 hours. How did Marilyn end up in prostitution? The circumstances are unclear, but one thing is certain: her childhood was difficult. She was placed in foster homes repeatedly. Marilyn's boyfriend and close friends were aware of her workplace and the nature of her job. According to a friend, Marilyn didn't have conflicting feelings about her profession. She openly discussed it without pride or shame. Since she worked in Quebec, 100 miles from their home, her boyfriend didn't object to her occupation. Gales, who was largely left to his own devices, began visiting a massage parlor multiple times a week. Although he seemed reformed to the parole board, his fundamental nature remained unchanged. On several occasions, he became violent towards female employees, resulting in him being banned from the establishment. Unbeknownst to the staff, Gales was a convicted criminal who had served time in prison for murdering his wife. In late summer 2019, when it was discovered that Gales had assaulted multiple women at a massage parlor, the parole board prohibited him from visiting erotic massage parlors, warning him that he would face imprisonment if he didn't comply. However, by then, Galassi had developed romantic feelings for Marilyn and found a way to bypass the rules. He offered her $1,300 Canadian to meet him in a hotel room, which she accepted. This was their first encounter outside of a massage parlor, and it happened without any issues. Galassi felt deeply sympathetic towards Marilyn, so he started opening up to her about his emotional struggles. He shared with her how much he still missed his late wife, whom he had mourned for 15 years. But he didn't reveal that he was responsible for her death. After this, Galassi began to sense that Marilyn was distancing herself from him, and their connection was deteriorating. He felt rejected, which sparked anxiety and jealousy within him. Galassi scheduled another hotel meeting with Marilyn for January 22, 2020. Marilyn told her boyfriend that she generally avoided hotel meetings, preferring massage parlors instead, as they had guards to protect the workers from potential issues and to escort troublesome clients out. However, the attractive offer of $2,000 convinced Marilyn to agree to another hotel meeting. Around 8:30 p.m., after dinner, the couple went to their hotel room. At 11:35 p.m., Galassi arrived at the police station and, similar to his 2004 case, confessed to murdering Marilyn. The police rushed to the hotel, hoping to find Marilyn still alive. Unfortunately, she had already been killed. The autopsy revealed 57 stab wounds on her body. It was determined that Galassi had spent about 2 hours at a bar before surrendering to the police, during which time he got rid of the murder weapon and Marilyn's cell phone. A terrible event occurred, but it was made even more distressing by the perpetrator's identity, past, and the circumstances surrounding his latest atrocity, sparking widespread outrage and demands for answers from the authorities. Bill Blair, the Secretary of Public Safety, expressed his condolences to Marilyn's family and stated that her death was preventable. Quebec Justice Minister Sonia Lebel sought an explanation for how a violent criminal like Galassi was granted parole and questioned whether the officers involved had sufficient training to assess public safety risks. She also called on Federal Public Safety Minister Bill Blair to investigate the situation. An investigation commission was established to examine the parole board's actions and found deficiencies in their work, case management, and supervision of the offender. The head of the Correctional Service of Canada described Marilyn's death as a terrible tragedy that should never have occurred, promising that the Correctional Service of Canada, in collaboration with the parole board, would take significant steps to prevent similar incidents in the future. Despite the high-profile comments, no one faced serious punishment in the end. Some staff members from the parole board were reassigned to different roles, while others were sent for additional training. Unfortunately, there is no way to bring back the young woman who lost her life. It is hoped that her tragic death will make decision-makers think twice about the serious consequences of their actions. As part of a settlement agreement between the authorities and the victim's family, the government provided compensation for her death, which prevented a lawsuit from being filed by her relatives. The amount of compensation remains undisclosed due to confidentiality agreements. It's worth noting that some people even blamed the victim for her own death because of her profession. Galassi was initially charged with second-degree murder, but the charge was upgraded to first-degree murder after it was revealed that he had planned the crime in advance and purchased the knife beforehand. Galassi admitted his guilt, confessing that he had deliberately planned the murder. During his trial in February 2020, the prosecutor argued that Galassi's motivation for the crime was jealousy, resulting from his realization that Marilyn was using him for financial gain. On February 27, 2020, the 51-year-old Eustachio Galassi was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. This time, he will be eligible to apply for parole, but not until he has served 25 years. unlike the 15-year requirement following the murder of his wife. Do you think Galecki will be released again if he lives to be 76 years old? Share your thoughts. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Zoe Nelson. Zoe Nelson was born on August 13, 1992 in Wishaw, Scotland. At the age of 18, she lived with her mother, stepfather, and two younger sisters, including 16-year-old Laura Ann, in New Mains, a village on the eastern edge of Wishaw, about 18 miles southeast of Glasgow. Zoe attended Motherwell College, where she was a popular student with many friends. A complicated romantic situation developed when both Zoe and her sister Laura Ann became involved with the same 20-year-old man, Robert Bain, who lived with his grandparents about a mile from the Nelson family home. Tensions between the sisters increased, leading to conflicts. On May 22, 2010, Zoe met Robert outside her home, which upset Laura Ann. When Laura Ann saw this, she rushed out of the house to confront Zoe. Their 40-year-old mother, Mary Ann Nelson, witnessed the fight between her daughters. According to Mary Ann, Laura Ann tried to provoke Zoe by flicking her hair and attempted to slap her face, leading to a physical altercation at the end of the driveway. Mary Ann intervened, breaking up the fight and telling the sisters to leave and not come back. Zoe complied with her mother's order and never returned home. At around 11 p.m. that same day, some locals spotted someone setting a fire in the wooded area known as Monkey Hill. The smell of smoke drifted to nearby homes, but at the time, no one paid much attention. Zoe's aunt, 35-year-old Shirley Nelson, later remembered that night, describing how she was sitting in her garden in New Mains after finishing her second shift at work. She and her sister sat in the back of the house until about 11 p.m. when it got cooler and they smelled smoke. However, they didn't think anything of it because of the warm weather. The next day, Zoe's family tried to contact her, but no one answered. On the afternoon of May 23rd, Stuart Bell, a 45-year-old government employee from Wishaw, rode his motorcycle into a nearby wooded area and saw something strange. At first, he thought it was a charred tailor's dummy, but upon closer inspection, he realized it was a human body that had been badly damaged in a fire. He immediately went home to call the police, who arrived 15 to 20 minutes later. When the police arrived, they sealed off the area, as nothing so horrific had ever occurred there before. News of the body's discovery quickly spread, and when Zoe's family learned of it, her mother, Mary Ann Nelson, went to the police to report her daughter's disappearance, which had happened after they had fought, and Mary Ann told Zoe not to come home. The police soon broke the devastating news to the Nelson family. Zoe had fallen victim to a crime. Mary Ann issued a statement through the police, describing Zoe as a typical popular 17-year-old with a strong presence in the local community and many friends. In just a couple of months, she would have turned 18. Her family is deeply distraught over her loss. Zoe's stepfather, Daniel, and her sisters, Laura Ann and Ashley, are heartbroken about what happened, and the family is urging anyone with information to come forward and assist the police in their investigation. Hugh Logan, the principal of Motherwell College, where Zoe studied vehicle body repair, expressed shock on behalf of the college community upon learning the dreadful news of her death. He described Zoe as a very popular student and conveyed that the college's thoughts are with her family and friends. A thorough investigation of the scene spanned several days, with a team of at least 50 police officers working on the case. Detective Derek Robertson, part of the main investigation team, lamented the loss of Zoe's young life and vowed that his officers would not rest until the perpetrator was caught. He urged anyone who saw Zoe between 5 p.m. and 11:20 p.m. on Saturday night to come forward and assist the investigation. Robertson noted that, given the area's popularity on the hottest day of the year, numerous people would have been taking shortcuts and sunbathing, and that the police were particularly interested in speaking with those who may have used the dirt trails. including one that crossed near the location where Zoe's body was found. Zoe was about 5 feet 6 inches tall, with a heavy build and collar-length brown hair. At the time she went missing, she was wearing gray tracksuit bottoms, a white long-sleeved top, and black Nike trainers. The detectives have been reviewing CCTV footage, phone records, and computer data, as well as conducting door-to-door inquiries and speaking to Zoe's friends and family to try to recreate her last movements on May 26th. The police released video footage from a local shop where Zoe was seen just hours before she died. These small details were crucial to the investigation, as they helped the police trace Zoe's movements and ultimately led to the arrest of the person responsible for her death. After examining the crime scene, investigators found a red plastic sombrero-shaped cap from a Sierra Silver tequila bottle near the body and an empty bottle of the same brand on the other side of a small walkway nearby. Due to the body being exposed to fire for approximately 7 hours, forensic experts faced limitations in determining the exact cause of death. The body was discovered with a partially melted plastic bag covering most of the face, leading pathologists to conclude that asphyxiation was the most likely cause of death. Despite the damage, the palm of the right hand remained relatively intact, allowing 2 DNA samples to be collected, one matching Zoe Nelson herself, and the other belonging to an unidentified male. Ultimately, the official cause of death was recorded as undetermined. By May 28th, police had gathered several witness statements that provided a disturbing account of Zoe's last days. One witness reported seeing Zoe with a heavily intoxicated and aggressive man at around 5:15 p.m. on May 22nd, who was hitting her on the head. Another witness claimed to have seen Zoe walking with a man with a tattooed face near his home in New Mains. A third witness described seeing Zoe with a similar-looking man in New Mains, who appeared angry, hit a lamppost, and threatened to take someone's life that night. Multiple witnesses came forward, all describing the same young man, 20-year-old Robert Bain. Notably, Robert Bain had a prior criminal record despite his youth. He had served 18 months in prison for robbery and was released just 7 weeks before Zoe's death. Additionally, he had been arrested 4 times for possessing illegal substances, though as a juvenile, he faced minimal consequences. Investigators started to view Robert Bain as a prime suspect in the case. Before they could take further action, Bain surprisingly turned up at the police station in Wishaw around 5:50 p.m. on May 28th. He was clearly intoxicated, slurring his words, and wanted to make a statement. Bain claimed that a few days prior, he had been in Motherwell, where he got on a bus to return home. During the journey, he said, a man named Stuart Campbell boarded the same bus. Bain alleged that he approached Campbell and asked if he had been with Zoe on the previous Saturday night. According to Bain, Campbell's response was incriminating. Yes, I took her life. This was the first mention of Stuart Campbell's name during the entire investigation, whereas Robert Bain's name had come up repeatedly. As a result, the police arrested Bain on the same day. A strong justification for Robert Bain's arrest would emerge during his trial. At the time of his arrest, Bain claimed to have last seen Zoe on the morning in May. However, forensic tests revealed incriminating evidence against him. A DNA sample from Zoe Nelson's hand revealed not only her own DNA, but also traces of another person's DNA, which matched part of Bain's DNA profile. Additionally, DNA evidence found on a tequila bottle and its cap, discovered near Zoe's body, matched both Zoe Nelson and Robert Bain. According to the forensic expert, this suggested that both individuals had consumed from the bottle and then replaced the cap. Expert Marie Campbell stated that the scientific findings indicated that Robert Bain's DNA was deposited between Zoe Nelson's fingers and on her right palm. The chances of the DNA found on the red plastic sombrero lid belonging to anyone other than Robert Bain were an astonishing 10 million to 1. Robert Bain was accused of being involved in Zoe Nelson's death due to multiple eyewitness accounts and DNA evidence. Despite this, he pleaded not guilty and acted defiantly, even confronting one of the investigators. He also denied an earlier alleged assault on Zoe, where a witness claimed he struck her on the head with his fist. Hundreds attended Zoe Nelson's funeral at Coltness Memorial Church on June 16, 2010. She was laid to rest at Campus Nathan Cemetery. Over 200 mourners, including her mother, sisters, and grandmother, gathered to pay their respects. Reverend Graham Rayburn led the service, noting the large turnout as a testament to Zoe's significant impact. He described her as a happy, cheerful teenager with a big heart, who loved fast cars and rangers. Sadly, she never met her newborn nephew or got to contact her biological father. On March 1, 2011, Robert Bain's trial began, during which he maintained his innocence. Testifying in court, Zoe Nelson's teenage friends recalled a conversation they had with her a week before her death, in which she attributed her scratches and bruises to a fight with Robert Bain. According to her friends, Zoe described Bain as bossy, unstable, and prone to anger over minor issues. He also controlled her social circle, dictating which friends she could see. Although Zoe and Bain's relationship was relatively short-lived, given he had only been out of prison for 2 months, he exerted significant influence over her and also pursued a relationship with her 16-year-old sister, Laura Ann. Notably, Laura Ann was aware of her sister's death 5 days before the body was discovered by a passerby, but kept this secret until the trial, where it was revealed that Bain had taken Laura Ann to the location of Zoe's body. Laura Ann, who testified from behind a screen to avoid seeing Bain, recounted that on May 23, the day after her argument with Zoe, she visited Bain's address to return some clothes. Upon arrival, she observed that Robert seemed nervous and had been consuming vodka. They soon left the house, with Bain claiming he wanted to show her something. According to Laura Ann, he led her to the location where Zoe's body lay. Recognizing the ranger's tattoo on her arm, Laura Ann identified the body as her sister. During court questioning, Laura Ann stated that Bain had confessed to hitting Zoe, and when Zoe attempted to retaliate, he lost control and took her life. Bain then allegedly used gasoline in an attempt to eliminate any evidence of the crime. Laura Ann confessed to walking with Bain on the day following the discovery of the body. Afterwards, she visited his home, spending time in his bedroom, where they listened to music together. She also had a phone conversation with him that lasted around an hour. A friend of Laura Ann, who testified in court, recalled that Laura Ann seemed happy and normal, despite knowing her sister was dead. When questioned about why she didn't reveal everything to the police during her initial interrogation, Laura Ann explained that she was afraid that if she told them, her mother wouldn't believe her and would think she was responsible for Zoe's death. The jury heard testimony from Laura Ann Nelson, who stated that Robert Bain had threatened her, saying she would face the same consequences as Zoe if she told anyone about his actions. On March 25, 2011, a jury of 7 men and 7 women delivered a unanimous guilty verdict. As the verdict was read, Bain became violent, requiring physical restraint. Handcuffed, he jumped up in the dock, struggling with security officers and police, and headbutting one of them. He also shouted insults and threats at Zoe Nelson's family, forcing the courtroom to be cleared while order was restored. After a 20-minute adjournment, Judge Lady Dorian agreed to proceed with the trial in Bain's absence. In a separate matter, Robert Bain was acquitted of stealing alcohol from an Asda store in New Mains on May 22nd, as well as disorderly conduct related to yelling, cursing, and waving a knife in various streets in Wishaw on the same day. Bain was also acquitted of stealing Zoe's cell phone, which was found in the woods, and of threatening a police officer during an interview at the Motherwell police station on May 28th. On April 27, 2011, Robert Bain was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 20 years for taking the life of Zoe Nelson. He received another 6 years for the obstruction of justice charge, and both sentences were to be served concurrently. The judge, Lady Dorian, described the crime as appalling and shocking. On Christmas Eve 2022, 29-year-old Laura Ann Nelson was found dead in her apartment after not being heard from for days. She was left with 2 children, ages 3 and 4. Her death was not considered criminal, as she had health problems, namely type 1 diabetes. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Christina Carlin Craft. Christina Rose Carlin Craft was born on November 11, 1983, in a coastal town in southern New Jersey, to Stuart Craft and Deanne Carlin. She had a natural flair for being in front of the camera, which would eventually shape her career path. After graduating from high school in Linwood in 2000, Christina worked as a waitress in southern New Jersey and later at the Borgata Hotel Casino and Spa in Atlantic City for several years. However, her ultimate dream was to become a model, and her determination paid off. She eventually found success in the modeling industry. In her promotional material, Christina revealed that she enjoyed participating in photo shoots featuring high-end lingerie and swimwear. According to Eva Waltz, a friend she met on a 3-day Maxim magazine shoot, Christina was a charming and beautiful woman with a great sense of humor. With dark hair and blue eyes, she embodied the essence of a fashion model. Christina had always dreamed of being on the cover of Playboy. In 2003, while working as a waitress at the Borgata Casino, she met Alex Urtielli. They started dating soon after, and Alex became her supportive partner, never opposing her career choices. After a long-term relationship, they got engaged. The couple stayed together until Christina's death. Christina achieved her goal of becoming Cybergirl of the Month for May 2009 and was invited to the Playboy Mansion. She attended parties at the mansion, gaining entry into the glamorous world. This success marked the peak of her career, and her ambitions soared, especially after meeting Hugh Hefner, whose attention was hard to capture. However, despite this, Christina failed to become a Playboy magazine model. Thousands of girls send their photos to the magazine, but only one is chosen. At 26, Christina was considered too old for the magazine, which typically features younger models. This setback affected her confidence, but she continued modeling. Her extensive portfolio included work with Redken, Maxim, Victoria's Secret, Vanity Fair, and many others. To further her career, Christina moved to New York with her boyfriend Alex. However, not all brands were willing to work with her due to her explicit photo shoot. Christina's career began to decline after her appearance in Playboy, ultimately coming to an end. Overcoming this challenging period in her life was undoubtedly tough, but she always had Alex's support. Known for her elegant appearance, captivating beauty, and scandalous behavior, Christina made headlines in 2016 for causing a scene at the Smith, a restaurant in New York. According to law enforcement sources and court documents, Christina Carlin Craft, 34, and her male companion got into an argument with the manager, Sergei Anakin, on March 6th over their bill. The man refused to pay, and the manager intervened. Witnesses claim Christina was drunk and falsely accused the manager of pushing her, but surveillance footage proved otherwise. She allegedly struck someone in the neck around 10 p.m., causing redness and significant pain. Christina was charged with misdemeanor assault, attempted assault, and harassment. However, the DA offered her a deal, and the charges were dropped on the condition that she remains trouble-free for 6 months. Christina has always had a fondness for Philadelphia, particularly Ardmore, which she considered a safe haven. With this in mind, Alex purchased an apartment in Ardmore in 2018 and relocated to Pennsylvania with her. However, Christina soon discovered that Ardmore wasn't as safe as she had thought. On August 18, 2018, she contacted the police to report a robbery. Earlier that evening, Christina had spent time at a bar in Philadelphia, but her memories of the night were hazy. The next thing she recalled was waking up the following morning, feeling groggy and suspecting that someone had drugged her with illegal substances. She had no recollection of how she got home or if anyone had accompanied her. At the time, Alex was away on a business trip. Feeling uneasy and anxious, Christina repeatedly expressed her concerns about her safety. During the investigation, police obtained CCTV footage showing a car arriving at Christina's apartment around 3 a.m. Unconscious in the back seat, Christina was being driven by a thief who stole her keys, entered her home, and plundered over $50,000 worth of valuables, including jewelry, designer bags, pillows, sunglasses, a credit card, and personal documents. The thief remained in the apartment for about an hour and a half before returning to the car, helping Christina inside, and then leaving her in the hallway. They placed the keys back in her purse and drove away. The police swiftly identified the perpetrator using a credit card statement. The driver was Andre Melton, a man with a prior criminal record. He was driving a rented 2018 Kia Sorento with Virginia license plates. Witnesses reported seeing the same car near Christina's house on August 17th, which was confirmed by police using specialized license plate recognition software. While the police were still searching for Andre Melton to recover Christina's stolen items, a far more serious crime took place. Just 4 days later, on August 22, 2018, Alex Celli called the police, asking them to check on his girlfriend, Christina Carling Craft, as he was unable to contact her and was on his way home. Christina wasn't answering her calls or texts. Upon arriving home, Alex found the apartment door locked from the inside. He then checked the security system, revealing that someone had opened the front door and the balcony door during the night. The police were called to the address and had to force entry by breaking down the front door, which was locked from the inside. Upon entering the apartment, they were immediately met with signs of a crime scene, including visible blood. A body lay on the bed, covered with a blanket. Lifting the blanket, they found a woman who had been severely beaten. Unfortunately, it was Christina Carling Craft, and she was already dead. Her body showed signs of blows all over, and her nose was broken. There was also a strangulation mark around her neck. It was later discovered that Christina had been strangled with her own sweatpants. When the detectives identified the victim, they had to break the devastating news to Alex, who was waiting outside. His beloved Christina was dead. This shocking revelation sparked immediate suspicion, as the people closest to the victim are often implicated in such cases. The police did not dismiss the possibility that Alex might be the perpetrator. Alex and Christina had a long history together, and anything could have transpired between them. It was Alex who had contacted the police station, expressing concern for Christina's safety, only for her to be found dead soon after. These events seemed too coincidental. It was possible that Alex had orchestrated the scenario to divert suspicion away from himself. The investigators requested that Alex accompany them to the police station to answer some questions. He agreed without hesitation. During the questioning, Alex explained that he had an urgent work commitment in New York on August 21st and had planned to return. The following night, August 22nd, at 2:30 a.m., he called Christina to bid her good night, but she didn't answer. Given her habitual wakefulness at this hour, Alex grew anxious. He made several more calls, but Christina remained unresponsive. After reviewing the security system, he discovered suspicious activity in the apartment that night, prompting him to relinquish his business and rush back to Ardmore. After hearing Alex's story, the police no longer believed he was responsible for Christina's murder. His alibi checked out, and he couldn't have been in two places at once. They cleared him as a suspect, but the question remained: who killed Christina? Who would want her dead? The investigators looked into Christina's report of a robbery 4 days before her murder, suspecting a connection between the two crimes. This led them to Andre Melton, the thief who stole from Christina's apartment. Maybe he returned to steal again, but his plan was foiled when Christina caught him. Perhaps he discovered she had reported him to the police and decided to take revenge. On August 22nd, the day Christina's body was found, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Andre Melton. When they went to his address, however, they discovered he was no longer there. Despite his absence, they did find some of Christina's belongings still at the location. The police also managed to obtain surveillance footage from the night of the crime, which showed Christina leaving her apartment, then returning a few hours later with an unknown man. The footage was recorded at 3:08 a.m., and surprisingly, the man was not Andre Melton. Further analysis of the footage revealed that the unknown man did not leave Christina's apartment again. The police later found an explanation for this using CCTV cameras on the streets of Ardmore. They discovered that Christina had visited a Philadelphia bar before returning to her apartment. Investigators reviewed the CCTV footage from the bar, which showed Christina meeting a man who later hugged her. This was the same man she had returned to her apartment with. After leaving the bar, Christina and her new friend were involved in an altercation. In the days that followed, detectives worked to reconstruct Christina's movements on the day she died, gathering data to piece together the events leading up to the crime. The police quickly ruled out Melton as a suspect, as he was not with Christina on the day of her death. However, it remained unclear whether her death was connected to the earlier robbery or simply a coincidence. On August 25th, the police received a new lead. Andrew Sanford, the taxi driver who had driven Christina and her companion that night, came forward. According to Sanford, Christina and the man had hailed him down rather than using the taxi app and had negotiated the fare. Sanford reported that the couple seemed affectionate and did not arouse his suspicion. When they arrived at their destination, Christina got out and directed Sanford where to go. It turned out that she didn't have any cash and offered to leave her credit card, but Sanford declined. Her friend then offered him $100 to wait for 10 to 15 minutes while they went inside. Sanford left 20 minutes later, as neither Christina nor her companion had returned. The couple, Christina and Alex, entered their second-floor apartment around 3 a.m. About an hour later, at 4 a.m., Christina made a call to her cousin, but she didn't speak. Instead, her cousin heard a man's voice in the background, warning Christina not to call the police. The call abruptly ended before the cousin could gather more information. It remains unclear why the cousin didn't call 911 after hearing this. The police were able to piece together the crime's timeline thanks to the door sensors in the apartment, which recorded exact times for each door opening. The records showed that someone opened the door at 3:08 a.m. and again at 5:10 a.m. Around the same time, the system detected that someone had opened the sliding glass door on the balcony, which explained why the surveillance cameras didn't capture the moment when the man Christina met at the bar left. When the police arrived after Alex's call, they found Christina alone in the apartment, leading them to assume that the perpetrator had jumped off the balcony. Police sought public's help through media, releasing surveillance images of two men, Andre Melton and the one at Christina's apartment the night she died. In a surprising turn of events, Andre Melton, whose whereabouts were still unknown to the detectives, contacted the police himself. He confessed to stealing valuables from Christina, but vehemently denied any involvement in her murder. The police were perplexed by this unexpected call, as they were still unable to establish a definitive link between the theft and Christina's death. It was possible that this was all part of a strategy devised by the two suspects. It seemed that Melton's intention was not to surrender to the authorities, but to proclaim his innocence in Christina's murder. On August 26th, the police station received an anonymous call from a man who claimed to know one of the suspects featured in the released pictures. He shared a room with the suspect at a psychiatric clinic in Philadelphia. The caller revealed that the suspect had previously chased a woman in Love Park, Philadelphia, and followed her into the local family court building, where he molested her and became aggressive, shouting and causing destruction. The incident led to a 2-hour stay in a psychiatric hospital, costing $70. However, the suspect was admitted without being identified, as no one wanted to deal with him. The police were left with a mystery on their hands. The caller then provided even more critical information, stating that the suspect bragged about recently strangling a woman, taking great pleasure and satisfaction from the act. Upon hearing this, investigators strongly believed that they had found the killer of Christina Carlin Craft. The police station received another call from a man who claimed to be a relative of the suspect from Philadelphia. He identified the man in the photo as Jonathan Wesley Harris, who had previously served a prison sentence for robbery. Harris was released from prison on July 15th, just 5 weeks before Christina's death. After conducting a thorough background check, investigators concluded that Andre Melton and Jonathan Harris had no connection and had never crossed paths before. Therefore, the police ruled out any possibility of a link between the two crimes. Furthermore, the police gained access to Harris's phone records, which revealed that he had sent several messages on August 22nd. One of the texts mentioned that he had met an attractive woman and was planning to visit her apartment on August 28th. With this new evidence, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Jonathan Harris and deemed it crucial to apprehend him as soon as possible, as they were unsure of his next move. However, tracking Harris down proved to be a challenge, as he had left no trace. Investigators finally got a break when they contacted Harris's sister on August 29, 2018, and learned that he had recently purchased a bus ticket to Pittsburgh. Unfortunately, they discovered that Harris was already on the bus when they spoke with his sister. The police realized they wouldn't be able to catch up with him, leaving the Pittsburgh police as their last hope. It was essential to be in the right place at the right time to apprehend Harris. The police investigating Christina's death reached out to the Pittsburgh Law Enforcement Agency for assistance. They provided the exact time of the bus's arrival in Pittsburgh and sent over a photo of Harris. The fugitive task force then set up an ambush, blocking all potential escape routes, ready to apprehend the suspect at a moment's notice. Shortly after, one of the employees spotted the bus approaching. They allowed Harris time to calmly disembark, avoiding any sudden moves that might provoke a reaction. About 10 minutes later, a policeman intercepted him. I saw his eyes scanning, searching for an escape route, but it was too late. According to a Pittsburgh police officer, when the officer asked Harris to identify himself, he provided a false name. He was subsequently arrested and taken into custody at the police station. Detectives from Philadelphia traveled to Pittsburgh to question Harris. They requested that he recount the events of the night he met Christina. Harris claimed to have seen her on multiple occasions at bars and nightclubs in Philadelphia. Christina Carlin Craft was struggling to adjust to her new life in New York, which had drastically altered her daily routine and environment. As a result, she would frequently visit bars, cafes, and nightclubs, but she was always by herself since Alex was constantly working and she had not yet formed new friendships. It was common for men at these establishments to approach her, taking advantage of her solo status. Harris was one of those men. Harris claimed he was drunk and high on illegal drugs when he met Christina. They had a drink, then went to her place, where they drank more and had consensual sex. Harris demanded $1,200, but Christina refused, sparking a heated argument. Harris said she hit him with a wine bottle, so he hit her back, causing her to fall. When she tried to call the police, he strangled her with sweatpants until she passed out. Jonathan Harris's story had inconsistencies. A toxicology report on Christina's body found only alcohol, contradicting his claim of a single hit. When confronted, he admitted lying. Initially, Harris denied involvement, but later confessed to beating her, saying, "I panicked," and covering her because he didn't want to see her. When the trial began, Harris, despite having confessed to the crime, pleaded not guilty, like many other criminals who later retract their confessions. However, the investigators had assembled a substantial amount of evidence, making it difficult for Harris and his lawyer to build a strong defense. They anticipated a sentence of 22 to 40 years for third-degree murder and attempted to avoid a life sentence. Nevertheless, The prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence that convinced the court that the crime was premeditated. During the trial, the court heard testimony from a man who had shared a room with Harris at a psychiatric clinic. This same man had previously contacted the police. He revealed that Jonathan Harris had earlier confessed to him, stating, "There's nothing like squeezing somebody and feeling the last breath leave their body." In August 2019, Judge William R. Carpenter sentenced Jonathan Wesley Harris to life in prison without parole, plus an additional 22 to 45 years. The judge added the extra decades to ensure that Harris would never be freed, sending a message to future governors or pardon boards. In December 2018, Philadelphia police arrested Andre Melton for the robbery of Christina Carling-Craft's apartment. In March 2020, the court sentenced him to 1 to 4 years in prison, followed by 3 years of consecutive probation, which means Melton will be under court supervision for a total of 7 years. Before learning his fate, Melton said, "I would like to apologize to the family for any grief or pain that I caused. I am not the bad person the district attorney is trying to make me out to be."